Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. This is the 220-1002 A Plus study group. This is the pre-show. So for the next 10 minutes, you get to see me fighting with cables. Well, maybe not the entire 10 minutes, but at least this first part. All right, let's get some headphones in. Hello, everyone. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes, or you can enjoy this part of the live stream. And if you are just getting here and you are live, make yourself comfortable, grab something to drink, get something to sit back and enjoy. In this first hour, we'll go through Q&A from the 220-1002 Core 2 A Plus exam objectives. And in the second hour, I'll just open up phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room and get things going there. Let's see how this works. Oh, I can hear myself. Oh, which means you can hear myself. That is all good in the neighborhood. Let's see if we can get a lot of this cable out of the way. There we go. Hunter in the chat room passed your Security Plus on Friday. Congratulations. That's a big one to have out of the way. Security Plus is a massive exam. Even in its 501 form, the 601, 30% bigger. Which one did you take? Did you take the 501 or the 601? I'm interested. I want to know. I'm curious. Inquiring minds want to know all about it. So we'll figure it out. Yes, I have my coffee. So 100 took the 501. So you got that 501 in before it was retired a month from now, which is great. You got the, I would say, the easier of those two options, and you're certified for 3 years. This is awesome. Fantastic. All right. We've got about 8 minutes to go before we get started. Let me check. Recordings are going here. Recordings are going down here. You can see my Cylons are running. I think we're in pretty good shape. Mixer's up. All the cameras look good. All right. Wow, and got an 809 as your score. 809 out of 900. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty strong number. So well done. Yeah, it is nice to have that one finished. Have that one in the pocket. We can put that one there. I think that's always good when you can get through a certification. And Security Plus is a big one. You know, it's only one exam, unlike the A+, but I think the total number of objectives on the Security Plus have got to be comparable to both of the A+ put together. We should look into that. If you weren't looking over my shoulder, I would do that. I would poke away at my desktop and see if we could look at the number of objectives for Security Plus versus the number of objectives for everything else. I wonder what it is. I was looking at Network Plus is 500 objectives, 499. Security Plus was much more than that, but I don't know about the A+. They have the two A+ exams compared to Security Plus. This latest Security Plus, the 601, is 30% bigger, so it's like 1,200 exam objectives. It's crazy. It's like 2 Network Plus exams and a little bit more. That's how big the new Security Plus is. I don't think people realize, because they haven't studied a lot. Most people have taken the 601, no. But if you haven't taken the 601 and you're more familiar with the earlier versions, you might be surprised. You might be very surprised at how big that 601 is. They fit in a lot of stuff. There was so much that was new. It was like I was building, well, I was practically building a brand new course. It took me forever to get that course built. Because not only did they add on 30%, they only took half of the content from the 501, which means you had to make up like 60% of the exam is brand new. It's some crazy number like that. And so it took a long time to put all of that together. Plus the things that were kept over, the things that were retained in the 601, had a little bit of a tweak as to their scope in many cases. So I ended up really modifying old content as well as I was building that course. Anyway, that's way too much inside baseball for most of you. But that's the process I go through every day, is figuring that out. 5 minutes to go. There's our 5-minute warning. Messages should have gone out on every all of the social media, so people will be joining us shortly for this. We'll be starting this in about 5 minutes. Let's see if I've got those look good. Audio looks good. Video. Do I have all of the video graphics up? Let's find out. Yes, I do. Those look very good. Okay. Now it's just a matter of getting through this. You know, we had the 221,000 one yesterday. I don't often do these back to back, but my schedule this week was just weird. So I'm doing these back to back because something else. Normally I do these on a Thursday, Tuesday and Thursday when I'm doing the A+, but Thursday got taken up by stuff, by life. You know how that is. And so there's just certain things you can't move. So I didn't. I just moved us, which I think is okay. We fit it in there, so that's good. Past the 1,001 with the 775 wasn't going to make the cutoff. Is there a cutoff you're working towards? Congratulations on your 1,001, by the way. That's a nice, strong score, too. Oh, and folks in the chat room taking their 1,002 in an hour. Well, we'll get the last set up. We'll figure out what this is. Yeah, this is quite a number of screens. This is sort of matrixy in its ridiculousness. Perhaps I've thought about, can I shrink some of these down? This screen over here really needs to be the same monitor as this. It needs to be just as big, and it needs to sit there, and that one's going to go away. This monitor actually makes noise. It actually has fans in it. So that needs to go away and replace with something I can put here. Plus, a little bigger would be good. Bigger's better. We need bigger screens, but that means I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, like 21-inch, 23-inch. How big are these? 27-inch screens. They're big. All along there. It's just a lot of screens. Now, normally when we're not doing this live thing, it is just this monitor and that monitor, and that's it. The laptop isn't even in the building. It's over in a completely different place. I only bring it over for the live streams, and this one is not on, and that one is not on. So those are usually powered down unless I am recording video. Now, if I'm shooting a course, that one is on, and these two are on. The iPad is usually not on. Yeah, let's count how many screens. Let's count how many LCD panels there happen to be on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all. Now, technically, if you count that little tiny one, I don't think that counts, does it? The one that's in the video switcher? I don't think that one counts. We won't count that one. 6.1 is what we're doing then. We'll count it as a 0.1. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. And we'll get going. Your videos helped me get into an IT job at FSU. Is that the Florida State University? Is that Fresno State? Is that one of those other FSUs? I never know. As a former, so yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, it is one of those. I used to work in computer operations at Florida State, so I worked in out in Innovation West. Is that what they call it? It's been a while. It's been a while since I've done that. Out at the Sliger building. That's where I used to work. The Sliger building is where I used to work. Well, I worked at the basement of the Love building, and then they moved all the mainframes out of there and moved it over to the Sliger building with supercomputers and cryogenerators, liquid nitrogen powered, cooled system. Not powered, but liquid nitrogen cooled, and cryogenerators to refreeze it. Innovation Park, thank you. I'm losing it. Just not quite remembering what happened. It was a long time ago. All right, I need to get my act together here. Do we have everything ready to go? I think we can get this one ready to go. Let's bring up our keynote. Let's click the button. Let's get a green light. Green light? Green light is good. There we go. That's up, that's up, that's up. I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we might actually be able to do a study group today, everybody. It's top of the hour right now, so let's Do one last check. This looks good. It's time to get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2021 Professor Messer Core 2 A+ study group. That means today we're going to ask questions that come from the 220-1002 A+ exam. That's what we're doing in this first hour. It's all Q&A. If you're joining us live, I'll talk to you in a moment about what you can do to participate. If you are watching this on the replay, you can't really participate live when you're watching on the replay, but you can still follow along. In the second hour, I will open up the phone lines, and I will be glad to take you through and answer questions from the chat room and answer questions from the phone lines and answer questions that I get in my email. We'll talk all about it. If you are here live and you'd like to participate, you can visit this web page. Just pop open a new browser window and browse yourself over to professormesser.com/QA. professormesser.com/QA. There's a question waiting for you on that page if you do that right now. You can also use an app for this because why wouldn't you? There's a Socrative student app. That's the name of it, the Socrative student, not the Socrative teacher. That's the one for me. Socrative student would be the one for you. If you use that app, it will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right. No spaces, no capitalizations. I think you just type it all in, one word, and you'll be in good shape. Now, if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you. We call this our rewind question because it is a question from last month. If you were here last month, then you might remember this one. Or if you're like me, you won't remember this one. If you're here brand new, then it's a new question for you. Remember, no answering in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. Here is our rewind question of the month, which asks, which of the following would be the best way to manage a group of 100 Windows 10 computers? Is it workgroups, RDP, safe mode, Active Directory, and SSH? Which of the following would be the best way to manage a group of 100 Windows 10 computers? Is it workgroups, RDP, safe mode, Active Directory, or SSH? If you think you know the answer, you need to plug in your answer. Not there. You want to plug it in here. There we go. professormesser.com/QA. No hints in the chat room, no answers in the chat room. I think you'll be in good shape once you go through that. We'll come back to this question in a moment. Lock in your answer, and we will revisit that in just a moment. Thank you for being here. We are not able to do these study groups without you. I guess we could do the study group without you being here, but it would be awfully boring. So it's nice that you're here and able to do this. Now, when I'm not here having this live stream, you can, of course, follow what we're doing all the time. Our YouTube channels at professormesser.com/YouTube. Please feel free to subscribe, click the bell, do whatever the kids say you should be doing at that point with YouTube. You go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have daily pop quiz questions for the Core 1 and Core 2 exams. You can find those at professormesser.com/Twitter, or if you prefer a pretty picture with your question of the day, go to professormesser.com/Instagram. You just type in professormesser.com/ the thing you would like to find me on, /LinkedIn, /Facebook, whatever those happen to be. You'll find me if I happen to be there. This particular study group is just like the one we did yesterday. We normally don't do these back-to-back, but today we're going to do them back-to-back. And today we're going to focus on the 220-1002. This is an exam that came out in January of 2019. You know, I put the estimated retirement as July 2022. I have no idea what the retirement would be. But that's 3.5 years after the release. And generally, that's how this works. Although in the last year, all of the dates got pushed. So we never know. But I think as long as it's that far out, we're talking a year out from now. So plenty of time. You've got plenty of runway. On average, it takes people 2 to 3 months to finish one of these courses, which means you have more than enough time to get through these. If you're thinking of working on the A+, this is the one you should be taking as we sit here in June of 2021. Your exam is going to be 90 minutes long. For the 220-1002, you have to score a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. I know, it's weird, but that's how they do it. And of course, if you are someone who is coming from the 900 series exams, 23% of this exam is brand new. And I say that to make sure that if you are studying from materials, make sure they say that they are for the 220-1002. Otherwise, you're missing a huge amount of information that would probably be certainly have an effect on your final score. So we don't want that to happen. We want you to have the best possible score. So you need to have the best possible study materials, and those should say that they are specifically for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. Also, make sure you have the objectives. They are crucial. You can find a link over to the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives, or go to the Google machine and type in CompTIA exam objectives, and you'll find exactly that. The Core 2 is based on these particular categories: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So all the questions we go through today will be for those specific categories. For those of you that aren't familiar with our courses, everything I make from a course perspective is available for you to watch for free on the internet. There are no registrations required. I don't want your email address. There's no paywall. I don't hide things behind somewhere else. I don't put a little bit out on the internet and make you pay to get the rest of it. Every minute of every video is available for you to watch for free on YouTube or from my website. Some people, though, like to have an offline version of it. They like to be able to have my course notes and my practice exams and my exam hacks ebook and have priority access to this live stream. And if you're someone who would like that as well, you can find that in my Success Bundle. Learn more about my 220-1002 Success Bundle by visiting professormesser.com/1002success. We also have free questions. They're free out on the website, professormesser.com/take10. I have A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus questions out there. They are archives of the questions that we do during these study groups. So a collapsed form, if you will, in a digital Q&A that you can take 10 questions at a time. Just bite off a little bit, see how well you do. I think those are useful to go through. I need to add some additional ones to this. If you're watching this on YouTube or on my website, in its video form, this video replay is available immediately afterwards. There is also an audio version of this available in podcast form. You can subscribe to that by visiting professormesser.com/podcast. The RSS feed is there that you can add to your podcast listening program. We've also got A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study group podcasts there. So if you like an audio form that you can listen to in the car, you can listen to when you're working out, this is what you can use at professormesser.com/podcast. And also, my marketing manager, Lori, about a day later is having to rewatch this. Everybody say hi to Lori. Hi, Lori. She is watching this and going through and putting timestamps into the YouTube video description, which means you can go back years with my study groups and find exactly the information you are looking for by simply clicking on the timestamp for the questions, the answers, and the calls that we will go through in the second hour. Also want to make you aware that on my website, if you're someone who will be taking the exam, then you'll probably need to pay to take the exam. And one way that you can pay is to use a voucher. You can purchase vouchers at third-party sites like mine to pay for your exam. The ones that are on my site are automatically discounted. You don't need a discount code. There's no special coupon you have to put in. They're just already discounted on my website. So you can save it by going to professormesser.com/vouchers to get your voucher. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough just to have a voucher. I mentioned my exam hacks ebook, which has a lot of great tips on things you can do during your exam to score better. And you should know what those are. I have documented them in my exam hacks ebook. So if you purchase the voucher from my site, you also get the exam hacks ebook. I'll just throw that in for free. So you now have access to this, what I consider to be very important information, especially if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before. There's little tips and tricks that we have accumulated over the years, and I put those into the exam hacks ebook. So A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. I'm going to add some other vouchers on there too. So for those of you that are going back and taking other CompTIA exams, I want you to have access to these discounts as well. And why wouldn't we? They're out there, professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about that question I asked earlier. Which of the following would be the best way to manage a group of 100 Windows 10 computers? I should have spelled out 100, shouldn't I? It's bad grammar on my part, but you know what I meant. Would you use workgroups, RDP, safe mode, Active Directory, or SSH? Now, if you've gone to professormesser.com/QA and locked in your answer, then you can see that 73% of you say it's Active Directory is what you would use. 22%, though, say, no, you'd use workgroups. That's a pretty strong number. And we've got effectively a three-way tie for third between RDP, safe mode, and SSH. I suspect a number of you are already working in an organization that probably has some Active Directory infrastructure. Most all organizations use Active Directory because you can centrally manage everything using these Active Directory domain services. If you need to reset someone's password, you just go to one screen on your machine, you type it in, and everything gets reset. You need to add an account, delete an account, change things, dealing with someone's configurations, you do it all from one screen. And that is Active Directory that allows you to do that. That really is some of the most powerful back office type features that Windows provides. One of the major reasons that Windows has such a strong amount of users, especially in the corporate environments, because this automation is just built into the operating system. No other operating system really does it this well. And so Active Directory is an important part, especially if you're managing a large number of devices. And that's why 75% of you answered D, Active Directory, as the correct answer here, and you're absolutely correct. It would not be work groups. 21% of you did choose work groups, but work groups require you to go to every single machine to configure all of the administrative settings. So if somebody was to change their password or want to change their password, if everybody was in a work group, you would have to go to 100 machines and change the password on all 100 of those machines. Can you see now why we don't use that in any type of large deployment? That's why we use work groups at home, but in any type of corporate environment, we use Active Directory to make that process so much easier. We also have RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. Only 2% chose that. That's the screen sharing that is built into Windows. Safe Mode is a method of restarting Windows into a less than operational mode, but certainly good for when you're doing troubleshooting. And SSH stands for Secure Shell. That is a secure protocol used for terminal communication, not how you would manage a group of 100 Windows 10 computers. The best answer here is indeed D, Active Directory. So in the chat room, what is the relationship between Active Directory and insert your favorite Microsoft application? In this case, Office 365. Active Directory is a central database. It's a list of every device that is on the network. It's a list of all of the users that have access to your network. It tells the systems what groups those users happen to belong to. It assigns rights and permissions that way. You've also got other capabilities in Active Directory that allow you to manage how somebody's able to use Windows. What do they see on their desktop? What changes can they make on their system? What changes can they not make on their system? You're able to manage all of that through Active Directory. Active Directory, for example, might put somebody into a group that would then allow them access to Office 365. So pretty useful to have that. That is Active Directory. That is certainly one of those things that you need to know if you're ever going to be working in any type of corporate or large environment. You will absolutely run into Active Directory. Well, now that we've gotten through our rewind question, I think a number of you have already gone through some of this. We now can start with some new questions, things you've never seen before. I make all new questions every month, and our first new question is always a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are at the very beginning of your exam. You'll get about 5 of these, plus or minus, and the exam questions you get that are performance-based questions are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be matching questions. They may ask you to put things in a particular order. They may have a screen that you need to drag and drop. They might pop open a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. You never know exactly what it will be. But of course, these questions come all from the exam objectives. They're not asking you something you don't know. They're just asking you in a way that's a little bit different than a multiple choice question. Today, I have a matching question for you. So matching questions are very useful. You'll see a number of these on the exam. They are a very good example of a performance-based question. And this month's performance-based question is a matching question that asks, match the command to the description. So I have 4 commands here. I have traceroute, grep, chmod, and sfc. And then I have 6 different descriptions. I have more descriptions than I have commands. That's on purpose. There'll be 2 left over when we're done with this. It makes it a little bit harder to do a matching question. But those descriptions are A, search through a text file, B, identify corrupted system files, C is initialize a partition, D is set file permissions to read only, E is view the route between two devices, and F is view all incoming sessions. So that is extremely useful to have a knowledge of these commands so you know when to use these commands and make them happen. So those of you listening in on the podcast side, let's go through this again. The four commands are traceroute, grep, chmod, and sfc. The 6 different descriptions are search through a text file, identify corrupted system files, initialize a partition, set file permissions to read only, view the route between two devices, and view all incoming sessions. So if you want to answer, if you think they're already in order, just type in 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. You're fine. This is something that you will be doing for your purposes. We don't summarize this particular one since we are definitely in a fill-in-the-blank kind of scenario online. That might be helpful to be able to use this. See if you happen to know what these commands are. Now, at the end of this, there's 2 commands that will be left over, 2 descriptions that will be left over, rather. Because I only have 4 commands and I have 6 descriptions. So for a bonus answer, so I think you should absolutely tell me what those extra 2 are. See if you know what the commands are for the ones that are extra. Maybe that would be the useful part of this. We'll have to see how you work through all of these. So let's now go through the process of stepping through. I see a number of you are putting in your answers. You need to stop Googling this one. You need to go pretend you are not in that situation where you're trying to figure out what the answers are. Hopefully that will not be you. You don't have access to Google on the exam, so you should not have access to Google. Now, just take a stab at it. We'll figure out to see how that works with all of it. Well, we'll have to know. We'll certainly know. Now, if you think you do know the answers, remember, do not go to, you want to be sure that you're able to go to and be familiar with all of these commands. There's a lot more commands on the exam than just these 4. So make sure you're familiar with all of them. In fact, on the 1002, you have to know Windows commands and Linux commands. There's tons of them. So make sure you are familiar with what they might be. Let's see how we do with the rest of this. Let's go through the steps now that a number of you have put your answers in. Let's go through each one of these and see if we can figure it out. And I don't think this worked exactly the way I wanted, but we've got a screen here. We're going to step through all of these. I'm going to scramble them up because now they are in the right order. Traceroute was the first one we looked at. Traceroute matches to E, view the route between two devices. It's in the name, isn't it? Being able to understand what routers are all along the way between point A and point B can be an incredibly useful network troubleshooting tool, especially if you take that trace route prior to a problem and then you take the trace route during the problem. You can find out very quickly where that particular outage happens to be, certainly what router it comes after. And that may be also a good way. We used to use traceroute whenever network providers would start moving things around on the inside of their network. We would be able to see that with traceroute. Second on our list is grep. Grep allows you to search through a text file very, very quickly. In fact, grep is a phenomenal tool. We use it extensively on Linux, although there are grep versions for Windows. WinGrep is a very popular example of one of those because it will search through a file so quickly. It's an incredibly useful utility. We use it all the time, and you should be very familiar with using it as well. Third on our list, setting file permissions to read-only you do using the Linux command chmod, or changing the mode. Change mode is what that stands for. Chmod allows you to change the mode, which allows you to set read-only, write, and execute permissions for individual users, for groups, and then for everybody else. You've got access in Windows to do that, or access in Linux to do that using the chmod command. In Windows, you just look at the properties of a file. You can modify it in the Windows user interface, but there are some command line prompts that will allow you to do that in Windows, but it's not chmod. That's not how that would work. You have to know those Linux commands for your exam. Make sure you're familiar with them. And last on our list, identify corrupted system files. SFC is an incredibly useful tool to be able to do that. SFC will be able to identify a system file that has been modified, and if you'd like, it can replace it so that it fixes the files that might be on your system. That is your system file checker, is SFC. If you've never done that before, then you've probably never been in a situation with Windows where you had to check the overall consistency and integrity of your system files. But that is exactly what SFC is for. Well, that leaves us with two at the end. We have initialize a partition and view all incoming sessions. So what command would allow us to initialize a partition? That would be the format command. If you have configured a partition and you would like to write a file system onto that partition, then you need to format it. And format command does initialize that capability. If you would like to view all incoming sessions to a system, whether you're running Windows or Linux, doesn't matter, the same netstat command will show you that as well. Netstat, incredibly useful to view all of those incoming sessions, outgoing sessions, communications to who you're talking with. They'll show you routing tables. Netstat's a very, very flexible command. It almost has too many functions. I'm doing man netstat way too much whenever I use netstat because I can't remember exactly which one of those hundreds of options are the ones that I need to use. Fortunately for your exam, you just need to understand maybe the top 2 or 3. And I have those in my video for netstat so that you can be familiar with those. So there's your 2 bonus answers. So if you knew it was format, you knew it was netstat, that got you somewhere. Although in the chat room, someone said diskpart. What about using diskpart, which is a command line utility to be able to configure partitions, and you can even format from inside of diskpart. So I guess I have to allow that as well. That would be a fine answer because that allows you to do that. I didn't set any particular requirements on that. I like the way you're thinking, though, because it's very useful to be able to run those commands all inside of diskpart and make it work. A session, when we talk on the network of what a session is, when you're communicating to another device and that device is communicating to you, we consider that to be a session. So when you pull down a web page, that's one session in many cases. Back when we used older versions of HTTP, it might have many sessions because part of the file, the text on the screen would be one session, the graphic that you're pulling would be another session, another graphic would be a third session. These days we do it a little bit easier. It's a little bit faster in how it operates because we realized we need to make this more efficient. And so that's when we talk about a session. That's what we are referring to. Hopefully you were familiar with these commands. If you don't recognize one of these or you'd like to be sure you cover all of the commands, they are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you download the objectives and you're able to gain access to that. Let's shift gears a bit and let's now do some multiple choice-based questions. No more performance-based. We have a multiple choice-based question that asks, a company is examining the code for a web server before deploying the software. Which of the following would best describe this software? Would that be enterprise, FOSS, DRM, commercial, or EULA? A company is examining the code for a web server before deploying the software. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it enterprise, FOSS, DRM, commercial, or EULA? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll be able to step through all of these and figure it out, but lock it in. And no Googling again. I see you. I'm watching these results come in. You can see the numbers come in for as I'm seeing it as well. So I think a lot of you are doing pretty well with knowing what these happen to be. So if you've ever been in the case where you've had to maybe evaluate some software or configure some software, you may have had to do this. So make sure you're familiar with what these are. If any of these terms look unusual to you or you aren't familiar with them, they all come from the objectives. I try not to make up things. I try to give you answers that are real possibilities. But if there is a term here that you don't recognize, make sure you make a note of it. You need to go back to the objectives and make sure that you have studied up on what that happens to be so you'll be ready if it happens to show up on your exam. Don't want that to happen either. So let's see how we're doing with this. I didn't want to give too much information on this one, but hopefully you're able to decipher what we're looking at or looking for on this. In fact, I do this all the time when I'm deploying software. So this would be a good one for you to be familiar with as well. This is one of those cases where terminology and terms and even acronyms in this case might even be useful to know. But we even have to understand those nuances between enterprise, FOSS, DRM, commercial, and EULA. So make sure you're familiar with those. Now that we've had a number of you lock in your answer, let's see how we did with this one. Let's show the results. A company is examining the code for a web server before deploying the software. Which of the following would best describe this software? And we're a little bit torn on this one, aren't we? We've got a few options available to be able to work through this. Let's see how we did. We've got 34% of you say this is enterprise software. 27% of you say this is FOSS software. 15% of you said this is commercial software. 14% say it's DRM software. And 11% said it's EULA software. So what would this be if we were looking at the code, just looking at the source code for it itself? Then we should probably be familiar with the different types of software we would be deploying. If you were deploying commercial software, we sometimes refer to that as closed source software. And closed source means you can't see the source code. You can't look through the code. You don't have access to the code. They're not going to share the code with you. That is something proprietary to the company. They've already compiled the software. It is an executable that they will hand over to you. And at that point, you can deploy that. You're effectively trusting that the company that made the software is not doing something bad in the software. So there is a bit of trust associated with that. Closed source is not something you would use to view the code. We also refer to that as commercial. If you wanted to view the code, if you wanted to see the actual source code of the software, you would very commonly be using something like open source software. And in fact, in many cases, it's free and it's open source. And so we refer to that as FOSS, which is free and open source software. So that is one where we can see the source code. We could even modify the source code and recompile it if we wanted to. If we wanted to change some of the terms that were in the software, if we wanted to change some of the text and the information, if we wanted to change the logic of the software itself, free and open source software would allow you to do that because you can read the actual code that the software was written in. That is one that's incredibly useful. Once you are installing the software, you may be prompted with a screen that gives you the terms on how the software can be used. That is a license that you would use that you must agree to when you are installing the software. We call that the end user licensing agreement, or the EULA. And that is one where, whether it's open source software, whether it's closed source commercial, it doesn't matter what type of software you're using, it almost always will come with an end user licensing agreement so that you know what you're able to do with the software, and the person who wrote the software is telling you how you can use it. Ultimately, the person who wrote the software gets to decide how it's able to be used, at least in its current form. That's how we use software these days. So that is one that's very useful. Now, if you're using the software and it has built-in protections that may limit things that the software can do or how many times you can install the software, then it probably is using digital rights management, or DRM. And if you see that you have to plug in a USB drive, you have to add some additional licensing features, it's checking to see if you have the CD in a CD cartridge or in the slot for CD. Well, that's one where DRM would be looking for something like that. So hopefully that's also familiar with these terms, or something you're familiar with, because you will run into this. And it certainly fits with the question that we had right here. The company is examining the code for a web server. They have access to the source code before deploying the software. Which of the following would describe the software? The only one that really describes the software: enterprise software is sort of just a generic term for software that doesn't have anything to do with being able to see or not see the source code. We also have DRM. We mentioned that is digital rights management. That has nothing to do with viewing the code. Commercial software, closed source, doesn't even allow you to see the code. You've got EULA, the end user license agreement, has nothing to do with viewing the code. The only one that would allow you to do this is the free and open source software. FOSS is what you would use. So hopefully that's one that as you're going through this and working through those pieces of where do I find the way software works, although we often think of software as how do I install it, you have to do a lot of work before you install it. And so it's important to know what these terms are. All of those terms, as I mentioned, come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with them. If you answered B, free and open source, then you got that one absolutely right. It's time for another question. Before we do that, let me thank Chan in the chat room for the $5 donation and the super chat. Thank you so much. I turn on the super chat so that a number of you want to contribute to the site. You're more than welcome to do so. Of course, I always say that you can buy things on my site, but some of you that would like to contribute in other ways, that's another way to do it, and we sure appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support. We appreciate that love. Let's now go to another question that I have. It is another multiple choice question to be able to view. Let's have a look. This next question, a Windows 10 question, which asks, what is the minimum memory requirement for Windows 10 x64? Whatever that means. The possible answers are 512 megabytes, 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, or 8 gigabytes. It's got to be one of those, right? What is the minimum memory requirement for Windows 10 x64? Is it 512 megabytes? Is it 1 gigabyte? Is it 2 gigabytes? Is it 4 gigabytes? Or is it 8 gigabytes? If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no hints in the chat room. Please no comments in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. We'll figure it out. We will get there and make that happen. So this free and open source thing is pretty important. If you are on the Professor Messer website right now, you are able to see that website thanks to free and open source software. So the web server itself that is running on my server is free and open source. So that's one of those examples of being able to use software and read through the software to be able to understand what it is doing. If you wanted to really look at the software, you'd really be able to step through all of that. You would probably need to see free and open source, because if I was using Windows and I was using some of those Microsoft applications for web services, those are already compiled executables. You don't get access to the source code. So that's a really good example of being able to work through those. Let's see how you did. A number of you have locked it in pretty quick with this one. I saw a lot of answers going really, really, really quick and being able to work through them. So let's see how you did with this particular one. If we go, what is the minimum memory requirement for Windows 10 x64? That is the 64-bit version of Windows 10. That's the shortcut writing for the 64-bit version. Would it be 512 megabytes? Would it be 1 gigabyte? Would it be 2, 4, or 8 gigabytes? Let's see what you answered. Well, we kind of gummed it up there at the bottom. We only had 4% that said 512 megabytes. Only 7% said a gig. 44% say 2 gig, 35% say 4 gig, and 10% of you say, no, you're going to need 8 gig as the minimum memory requirement for Windows 10 x64. So we'll have to figure out what these happen to be. Interestingly enough, Windows 10, you would think it would need a lot of memory as a minimum. But in fact, if we look at the chart that is on my video from section 1.2, an overview of Windows 10, if you're running the 32-bit version of Windows 10, first, why are you doing that? Stop doing that. But secondly, you only need 1 gig of RAM to be able to run that 32-bit version at a minimum. Now, obviously, you would not want to run any Windows version with bare minimums. This is about what you absolutely have to have in the system for the install process to work properly. And for the 32-bit version, which is summarized or abbreviated as x86, as kind of a callback to the Intel 8086, 286, 386 family of processors, the Windows 10 64-bit version requires 2 gigabytes of random access memory. So that is one where that obviously you would not want to run Windows on 2 gig, but you could. If you want to try it sometime, pop open a browser, maybe do a virtual machine. You can go out to modern.ie, download one of the Windows 10 VMs, shrink it down to 2 gigs, see how it works for you. It's not going to work very well. When you do that, it'll start, and then it'll really be slow. You know, you want better performance than that. You need more than 2 gig, but that is the bare minimum. You have to start somewhere, right? So that is the bare minimum for the installation program to work properly. And it does a check whenever it's starting up to see exactly what the different options might be. And 2 gig of RAM is what you would need for that 64-bit version. Very useful to have that there. How many people answer 2 gig for the 64-bit version? 46%. We almost hit the majority there. But certainly the plurality of you did say it was 2 gigabytes of memory, and you got that one absolutely right. 4 gigabytes, not necessary to be able to run as a minimum, although I would say 8 gigabytes is probably what you should be doing as a minimum to be able to do that. 9% shows that one. And it is not down to the 512 megabytes or the 1 gigabyte of memory that you might require for a 32-bit version of Windows 10. So for Windows 10 x64, the answer was 2 gigabytes. Answer C, 46% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. As you can tell just from these very few questions that we have gone through, that there is a lot that you would need to know to pass your 220-1002 Core 2A Plus exam. And on the exam itself, it's an interesting mix of questions, and perhaps even more importantly, the questions are phrased in a particular form. They have a style of asking questions with CompTIA that would really help to be familiar with before you walked into the exam. I looked at a number of practice questions online, and I found the practice questions online not to really be that great. So I thought, why don't we make some questions that are as close as possible to the same style, the same format, the same structure as what CompTIA tends to do, but they are questions that are completely original, that are going to teach you about topics that are put into exactly the same distribution as the actual exam. And the final culmination of that is my practice exams book for the Core 1 and a practice exams book for the Core 2 exams. The one we're looking at here is for the Core 2 practice exams. There's not only a physical version of this book, but this is also available in a digital PDF form. If you get the physical version, then you get the digital version for free. This book, instead of giving you sort of a bulleted perspective of what's in this particular book, let me show you what this looks like. Here is the book itself. I've opened it up. We're on question 15. A user in the accounting department has recently installed a new app on their Android tablet. The app was not downloaded from the central app store, but instead was downloaded directly from a website as an APK file. Which of the following would describe this installation process? Is it cloud service, sideloading, biometrics, or encrypted? Now, if you're using a PDF reader that you can annotate, you even may want to circle things and highlight them so you can come back later. It's just a PDF file. It's wide open, so you can make changes to this if you would like to. But you can also click on the side to go directly to the answer list or directly to the details. And I'm going to click the details. It takes me to another page in the book that shows me the question again and then gives me the answer as B, sideloading. And it gives an explanation of why that is the right answer. I think that's commonly what we would see with a number of these questions, although because I've written these questions, they are very specific. They are not questions that are in any way going to have any vagueness to them. You will be able to find the right answer every time if you happen to know it. There's also, this is something you don't often see, where every incorrect answer is detailed. Why is that answer incorrect? Why is this answer incorrect? And why is the other answer incorrect? I don't just summarize and give you an answer why those things happen to be incorrect. I go through each one of those so that you can really understand why that particular one that you may have chosen was not the one that I consider to be correct. And you're also learning something from these topics as you step through each one of those as well. Now, at the end of that, if you would still like some additional information, I have a QR code right at the bottom of the screen, and this is an active link that you can click on that will take you right to the page. In fact, you could do that right now if you have your phone handy. Just open up the camera, point it at the screen, and it will click over and take you to Objective 2.8 in my 221,002 course, and is the Securing Mobile Devices video that describes this particular topic. Once you're done, you can click the back button and go to the next question that is in the list. That is my practice exams. And I tried to make this to be a set of practice exams that I would want to use. This is something that also helps support what we're doing. We make all of our videos available for free, but if you need some additional study materials, I want to give you the highest quality study materials that you would ever be able to find. And I think this is a good example of what one of those might be. Find out more about these practice exams at professormesser.com/core2pe. professormesser.com/core2pe. Let's do another question. I've got another multiple choice based question here. This question, I'm going to pull it up on your side so we can all see it together. It asks, a hacker is using a pre-built set of hashes to quickly brute force a password hash. Which of the following would best describe this technique? Would that be a rainbow table, a hash replay, a dictionary attack, an on-path, or spoofing? A hacker is using a pre-built set of hashes to quickly brute force a password hash. Which of the following would best describe this technique? Would it be a rainbow table, a hash replay, a dictionary attack, on-path, or spoofing? If you happen to know what the answer is, please know answers in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. Obviously, there's a huge section in the 221,002 on security, and obviously this one is coming from that section on security. You need to know what all of those might be. If you've ever worked through these, this is, even if you've never done this, you need to absolutely go through the process of understanding how the hackers are doing this. This is one of those that I think if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to understand how did they break into this system, you have to know how they think. You have to know the tools that they use. You have to be familiar with the processes that they use. So it's important that you understand that security section of the 221,002 and be able to work through that. Yeah, the networking section is in the 221,001. The security section is in the 221,002. And there's maybe a little overlap there, not much, between those two. Almost no overlap between the 2000 or the 1001 and 1002 exams. The Core 1 and Core 2 are very different exams, which is great. It allows you to focus on one exam at a time. You don't have to put them together. You don't have to take both exams at the same time. In fact, you do not want to put both exams together and do them both at the same time. That would just be crazy. So don't have that happen. Take them one at a time. Study for one exam. Learn everything that's in the exam objectives for that one exam. All of your books, all your videos, everything should focus on that one exam. When you pass that exam, you can forget all that and go to the next one. Well, maybe not forget it, but you don't have to worry about those topics anymore because they don't show up on the other exam. This is very useful to know this. So one of those situations. This is indeed one of these topics you need to know for the exam. Some folks in the chat are saying, do I have to know about cracking passwords? Yes, you do. It is a big section of Security Plus, and it helps you understand how to protect your systems a little bit better. Let's see how you did with this one, which asks, a hacker is using a pre-built set of hashes to quickly brute force a password hash. Which of the following would best describe this technique? Is it a rainbow table, a hash replay, a dictionary attack, on-path, or spoofing? And as we look at the results, 48% of you say it's a rainbow table. That's almost half. We'll give you half on that one. 30% of you, almost a third, say it's a dictionary attack. That would allow that. 17% say it's a hash replay. 4% say spoofing, and only 1% say on-path. So we're really torn here between maybe these top three of rainbow table, hash replay, or dictionary attack. Which ones could these possibly be? Well, if we have a pre-built set of hashes, we've already done the work of building out this hashing table or this hashing lookup method prior to getting our hands on these hashes, then we would be using a rainbow table. A rainbow table is certainly very, very useful if you know the method that is used for hashing the passwords and the passwords are not in any way salted. Salting is additional information you add to the password before you hash it that makes it truly unique and effectively makes a rainbow table useless to you. But if it is a common method of performing this hash and someone knows that method, they can, well before they get their hands on those hashes, effectively calculate the entire list of every possible hash and what they may refer to. And that's what a rainbow table does. Obviously, it's going to speed up the process of cracking these passwords because a hash can't be undone. You have to instead brute force the whole process. This is effectively a brute force that's already been done for you. Not really even brute. It's just a force that has been done for you prior to you going through the process of finding all these passwords. It's one of the ways that the bad guys are able to get their hands on these hash values and very quickly be able to discern what the passwords are. These days, you can even do rainbow tables that are already pre-calculated in the cloud. They're already available. You can just paste in the hash and it immediately shows you what the password happens to be. That's why it's so important to use salt whenever you're hashing to be able to do that. So that's why if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to make it as difficult as possible for someone to find the passwords on your system, use that salt. That way they can't use a rainbow table for that to operate properly. The rainbow table that's sort of the term they use in cryptography, is the rainbow. I guess every color of the rainbow is listed in this table. So that's where that comes from. I have more descriptions on hashing, on rainbow tables, on salting, and other brute force and other features around passwords. They are all in my course. This one happens to be in section 2.5. We went a little ahead of the schedule there. Section 2.5, brute force attacks. You can have a look at rainbow tables and even more associated with that. And I give you some good descriptions on that. If you're really interested in passwords, we go really deep into it in Security Plus. We just finished our 601 videos where I go deep into salting. I give you a demonstration of salting and can show you how salting changes the hash, even if the same users have exactly the same password. From the perspective of the attacker, they all look very different. That's another benefit of salting. 49% of you got this one right. The answer was a rainbow table. Not a rainbow table, but a rainbow table. You know what I'm saying. 48%. That's pretty good. You guys did really well with that one. Let's do another one. I've got a multiple choice question on this one that shows a user with a 1 terabyte hard drive is seeing slow transfer times when loading large files. Which of the following would be the best solution to this issue? Would we run the defrag command? Would we kill the task with the highest CPU utilization? Would we restart system services? Would we reload the OS? Or would we roll back to a previous restore point? All 5 of those options available to you. A user with a 1 terabyte hard drive is seeing slow transfer times when loading large files. Which of the following would be the best solution to this issue? Would we run the defrag command? Would we kill the task with the highest CPU utilization? Would we restart system services? Would we reload the OS? Or would we roll back to a previous restore point? See how you do with this one. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Being able to know what the possible answers might be for troubleshooting something like this. This one's hard to see because my head's in the way. It doesn't cut that off on the screen. Can I make it a smaller on the screen? That's the wrong screen for you to see. I'm seeing another screen get smaller, but not this one. Let's see how we do. That's just too small, isn't it? Yeah, let's just keep it the way it is. I think we're fine with making that happen. See if you know what this one is. And I think a number of you did because I saw the numbers went up really quickly right after I answered this one. A number of you are putting in what you think the answers would be for all of these. See if you happen to know what it is. The 1002 exam really expects you to understand some of these troubleshooting nuances. When you're troubleshooting, what's the first thing you should do? When you're troubleshooting, what's the best thing you should do? There is a number of things that you could do here, but for this answer, we're asking for the best solution for this answer. And for the best solution, you have to be able to understand what each one of these possible answers is and be able to provide what you think the best option might be and why that is. And a lot of people go through that and get very worried about answering what the first or best is. But you'll notice on these questions that if you know the material, it's very obvious what the best answer is going to be. It should point you right in a direction and be able to work through that. Let's see how you did when going through your troubleshooting. A user with a 1 terabyte hard drive is seeing slow transfer times when loading large files. Which of the following would be the best solution to this issue? Would we run the defrag command? Would we kill the task with the highest CPU utilization? Would we restart system services? Would we reload the OS? Or would we roll back to a previous restore point? We have 74% of you that said you would run the defrag command as the best option. But as some people mentioned in the chat room, there's other options in here that could have an effect, but perhaps are not the best possible answer. For example, killing the task with the highest CPU utilization could be something that might help transfer times, but just because something has a high CPU utilization does not mean that it has anything to do with the ability to transfer files from a 1 terabyte hard drive. It's something that's completely different, kind of grasping at straws at that point. Because something has a high CPU utilization doesn't have anything to do with necessarily with transferring data from a storage drive, especially when we're talking about the defrag command and being able to work through that. Defrag is incredibly useful to be able to work through those. 3% of you said to restart system services, 1% roll back to a previous restore point, and 0 to reload the OS. Practically no one chose those. Restarting system services, which system services? What are there? There's like 100. We would not want to restart all of them, so that's vague enough we can throw that one out. Reloading the entire operating system. Sure, I got an afternoon. Why not do that? Probably not the first thing we should do. Probably not the best solution for this issue. May not even solve the problem, which would be something else we have to worry about. And lastly, rolling back to a previous restore point, we're not convinced at this point with the information that we've gathered that this has anything to do with a bad app, a bad operating system, a bad file, because this could be nothing bad. And in fact, in this case, it could just be that the files that we are loaded, especially when loading large files, are having to gather all the different pieces of that large file from different parts of the hard drive. It would be nice if everything was all together in one contiguous form. That's exactly what a defrag command will do for you, the defragmentation process. For those of you that have ever seen the defrag, it's in the properties of the drive that you're working with. You can also run the defrag command from the command line. And this is what is a good place to start. If you're trying to troubleshoot or at least get an understanding, this will tell you how fragmented the drive is. You may not even have to go through the defrag process. You may look at it and go, well, it's 99% defragmented already. Or it may tell you that it's all just fragmented. It's just a mess. So this may be a great way to do that. Are there other ways you could optimize this? Sure. Of course there is. Everybody in the chat room has got my favorite answer, which is why don't they run an SSD? Well, because they don't. Not everybody has that luxury. Everybody's working from older machines. And one of the things that you will find when you get into an enterprise or a large organization, you don't all have brand new machines. You have machines that have been around for a number of years, and it's your responsibility to be able to manage and keep those machines up and running. This is one. I don't see how defrag's on the verge of being outdated. It absolutely is very, very valid utility, especially if you're running hard drives. Incredibly useful. It's not going to go away. As long as you have spinning drives, defrag is an important utility. Obviously, you don't need to use this on solid state drives because there's no moving parts. There's nothing that you would need to defragment to be able to increase speeds. In fact, the ability to run defrag on an SSD is disabled. You can't do it. Windows won't let you do that. So this is one where you can only run defrag on a spinning drive. And quite honestly, spinning drives still an incredibly important part of what we are using. They are certainly cost effective, especially at larger sizes, especially if you do backups, you need some spinning drives. So that's an important part of this, is to be able to use that utility and know when to use it. And that's why the folks that said A, run the defrag command, Got this one absolutely right. It is the defrag command. That's what you would want to use. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, then you want to listen carefully over the next minute or so. If you're not watching this for CEU credit, then none of this has anything that you would have to worry about. This has nothing for you. So make sure that you go to ProfessorMesser.com, and at the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website is an option there to contact us. The contact us option pops open a form, and in that form, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, make sure that you put that this is the June 2021 Core 2 study group. That way I know what we're talking about. And on a line by itself in the body of the message, put the super secret code word of the month, defrag. The super secret code word of the month, defrag, or even defragmentation if you care to type it all out. I'll know what you mean. Defrag is what we're looking for there. The defrag, you can also put anything else you would like into that message. I look through and read through every single one of these. I also will send you an email if everything was done properly that says you must have watched this. Here's your 1 hour of a webinar credit. If you're someone who is renewing your certification, you can collect a certain number of webinar category CEUs to be able to renew your cert. You can't do all webinar category CEUs, but it might help you. I know most of you are probably using something like the CertMaster CE, which admittedly is a much easier way to renew your certification than collecting CEUs. But I realize some of you still do that, so you're more than welcome to follow that process. Go to the top or the bottom of the website, click Contact Us, put in the name, email, the June 2021 Core 2 study group, and the super secret code word of the month, defrag. Defrag is what you should be using. Yes, I have a video on how to renew your certification in just a few hours, and it talks extensively about CertMaster CE. So absolutely very useful to have that. Make sure you're familiar with that process. We have time for another one. So let's do another question. I've got one for you. This next question asks this. A script includes the assignment of x equals 42. Which of the following describes the value of 42? Is that a string, a variable, an integer, a comment, or floating point? A script includes the assignment of x equals 42. Which of the following describes the value of 42? Is that a string, a variable, an integer, a comment, or a floating point? If you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. As always, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. You want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Do you know this one? There's a whole section at the end of the 221,002 on scripting. So you have to know a whole video that talks about scripting. It's brand new to the 221,002. So if you haven't gotten that far, this might be a new question for you to be able to have that. This is one where you need to understand what these are. And this does not depend on how I define anything. Everything is in this question enables you to answer the question. It is not trickily worded. This could not be more straightforward. This is not a trick question. I don't do trick questions. This is a question that is probably could not be more straightforward. But you do have to know what these terms mean. I guess if there's a tricky part, you have to know things. How tricky of them to require us to memorize things? Well, that's an exam. That's an industry certification exam for you to be able to do that. Make sure you're familiar with all of these. So this is where you do need to understand a good bit of where we're going with these. So make sure you're familiar with the process at the very least of using these scripts. There's also interesting pieces of this video that talk about the different types of scripts. So not only do we need to kind of understand what's happening in the script, we need to understand when we would use certain types of scripts. So that's where we would go. Yes, memorizing is cheating because you know the answers before going in. I've never heard that, but that makes perfect sense to me. I'm going to go with that. Memorizing is cheating. Maybe more people would memorize if we would call it cheating. Maybe that's what we should be doing, kind of reverse psychology to make that happen. Maybe or maybe not. We'll have to see. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a script includes the assignment of x equals 42. Which of the following describes the value of 42? Is it a string, a variable, an integer, a comment, or floating point? And we have 57% of you say it's an integer. 37% said it's variable. 5% is a string. 1% is a comment. 1% is a floating point. So let's talk about things that are basics from scripts. There's different types of data that you could have in a script. If the data is a series of characters, especially if you're putting those characters in quotation marks, then it is a string. It's a string is what we call that. So a string of text, if you will, to be able to work through it. If the type of data that you're putting into your script is what we call a whole number, which means it does not have a fraction or a part of a number, doesn't have a decimal point, then it is an integer. That is the fancy term for a number. That is, if you can look at the number on your hand, it's an integer. That's what that is. There's no fractions, there's no decimal points, it's just an integer. And if it does have a decimal point or a fraction, we refer to that as a floating point data type. Floating point data type. Those are just a number of the different data types and things you need to be aware of with scripting. Those come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And you can see I even have the number that we chose, number 42. 42 is indeed an integer. And 56% of you said, yep, 42 is an integer. That describes that value of 42. Now, 36% of you said, but wait, that's a variable. Actually, the variable is the x part. The x is the variable part of this. The variable is x and the integer is 42. The value is 42 in this particular case. It is not a string because it does not have quotations around it. And in this particular case, it is just 42 by itself. If you were putting, in some scripting languages, if you put quotation marks around it, it turns into a string. So it could be 42 with quotations around it. Turns out not to be an integer. In most cases, it turns out to be a string. So that's an important part of that. We also have comments. It's not a comment. It's not a floating point. We know those already. The best answer here, the only one that really does describe the value of 42 is indeed an integer to be able to do that. So hopefully you're familiar with that. If you're doing anything associated with working through scripting languages, so hopefully you're familiar with these. Maybe that will help you as well as you're going through these and understanding what they happen to be. Be able to understand the differences and work through these. Maybe that will help you as well, making them happen. This is an incredibly important part of the exam. It's in that last section. You can't even see this, but that comes from section 4.8. The name of the video is indeed scripting. Does CompTIA ever do trick questions? They don't. Everybody likes to think that they do. A trick question is one that you don't know the answer to, I have found. That seems to be the overall definition of a trick question, which, by the way, is not a trick. It's a question you don't know. That's what that is. You should be more honest with yourself. CompTIA does not do trick questions. They do ask questions that perhaps you may not know the answer to. That's so tricky that they do that. How annoying. I know it's at the top of the hour. Let's do one more. Let's do one more question to kind of close things out. This next question asks, an administrator would like to disable indexing on a kiosk computer. What should be used to configure this setting? Would you use user accounts, File Explorer options, Windows Defender, Device Manager, or Credential Manager? An administrator would like to disable indexing on a kiosk computer. What should be used to configure this setting? Is it user accounts, File Explorer options, Windows Defender, Device Manager, or Credential Manager? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you'll be able to see all of that. Put your answer in, lock the answer in. Be able to figure those out. If you fail the exam, do they tell you what you got wrong? Actually, they tell you what you got wrong, whether you fail it or not, but they only tell you what section of the exam objectives you got wrong. They don't give you the questions and answers when you walk out, but you do know exactly what section you failed or did not get correct. So that can be useful. as you go through these. So hopefully this is something that can, if you don't pass your exam, make sure you have a look at your online results page and understand, oh, well, I got everything in section 1 pretty well. Section 2, I did well. I bombed section 3. And it even goes through the different areas of section 3. Did I do well in 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.3? You'll be able to break them all out and have that there. Jake in the chat room, thank you for the $10 donation. Sure appreciate it. Didn't even put anything in. He's not asking for anything. He's not making a statement. His statement, he's just throwing it down. That's the statement that Jake is making, and we appreciate him doing it. Thank you so much for that donation. It really does go a long way to keeping these lights on, and we appreciate all of your support for that as well. Any of you that I know that some of you are contributing to the chat, which is great. Watching the videos is contribution. You know, there's ads that go along with the videos that help. So if you're even watching the videos, you indeed are contributing as well. Every little bit counts to keep this crazy experiment going. So we do appreciate it. Let's see how you did with this one. An administrator would like to disable indexing on a kiosk computer. What should be used to configure this setting? Would it be user accounts, File Explorer options, Windows Defender, Device Manager, or Credential Manager? 50% of you right on the money. Half of you say File Explorer options. I'm leaning that direction since it's 50%, but 21% said user accounts, 15% said Credential Manager, 13% said Device Manager. It could almost be any of those. Only 1% of you said Windows Defender. So we need to think about where we would configure indexing on a kiosk computer. The computer that we have is a kiosk, probably sitting out in the open. If you walk into a store, you'll often see the kiosk computer just inside the doorway where people will usually come in and put in their applications for employment. So those kiosks are tightened down. People don't have access to anything. They're very fundamental. They don't allow you to run anything on them. They're lockdown machines. But we have one where we would like to disable the machine from indexing the files that are on the storage drive of that device. And to be able to do that, we would run the folder options from File Explorer, which not only allow us to configure options such as how windows are viewed and expanded, but we can also change how things are searched for on that system, and indexing and configuring what areas of the drive can be indexed and what part of the drive cannot be indexed is configured in File Explorer. This is where the system will create an index, just like an index in the back of your book. If you need to find something quickly, Windows looks through the index. So if you have to search for a file that has in the file name the word professor, it doesn't look through every file on your drive. It just goes to the index. It looks up in the index. There it is. And that's why it's able to present the answers to you very, very quickly. Well, if you turn off the indexing, it really does have to go through every file to figure that out. But there may be times like in a kiosk where you would like to turn off indexing because you're never going to need it. It's adding additional overhead. You don't need to have that running on that system, so you can disable the indexing on there. There may be reasons on your own system to disable indexing, and that's where you do it inside of File Explorer. That means those of you that chose File Explorer options, answer B, 51% of you got the indexing piece turned off because you found it in File Explorer. So very useful to have that functionality. Now, user accounts 21 does not have any indexing settings. That's not where you would configure the indexing on that system. You would not configure it in Credential Manager, which keeps tracks of your usernames and passwords, and you would not configure it in Device Manager, which manages the hardware that you are plugging into this device. And certainly Windows Defender will protect you against malware and viruses, but it has nothing to do with configuring indexing on anyone's computer. Instead, we want to optimize this poor little kiosk, which is probably an old machine they pulled out of the back. It's barely running to begin with. Let's turn off everything that's not essential, including indexing files on this machine. We would do that from your File Explorer options. I think that would be a very good reason to do File Explorer options and have the indexing. And there's been certain times where I've turned off the indexing on my own Windows computer because I didn't need to have anything indexed there. You could also force it to index information. Another way to do that. So very useful. If you're someone working through the details. I didn't mention, but Corey in the chat room, thank you for the $10 donation. We appreciate that love as well. You say thank you so far. I say thank you for being here. We sure appreciate all of your support. And thanks for the $10 donation as well. We've gone through an hour of Q&A. Can you believe that? But we're not done yet. Stick around for the after show. Before we do that, I'll remind everybody that there is an extensive amount of information you should be reading through in the exam objectives. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/objectives, and you'll be able to download all of the objectives. I have a link that takes you over to the CompTIA website where you can download every single one of those objectives and have everything that you might need in that objective. It is a comprehensive list. This is not a summary of things you need to know. This is exactly what you need to know. It's a great checklist before you walk into your exam room. We do one of these study groups every month. We do a number of study groups every month. Next week on Tuesday, we have our Network Plus, and a week after that on Wednesday, we have Security Plus. I'm changing around some of the dates lately. You'll notice next month we're back to sort of a normalish sort of schedule. At least that's how it is right now as we sit here in June. Where in July on the 6th and the 8th, we have our Core 1 and Core 2 study groups, Network Plus on the 14th and Security Plus on the 21st. But these things change all the time. So if you're ever wondering when the next live event is going to be, just visit the website. I keep this updated minute to minute at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. If my schedule changes, and it sometimes does, you can find all of that at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. I update that first thing so that you'll be able to know where that happens to be. I also want to make you aware of my course notes. I mentioned this earlier that I have a set of notes that I've already built that tell you everything you need to know for the Core 2 exam. Here's the PDF version of these. All the charts, all the graphics, all of the details about command lines, every bit of text from these videos, they are all in the course notes. And you can imagine with so many videos for A+, there is a lot of content in there. Make sure you are going through and familiar with everything that's in the objectives. I summarize it all in one comprehensive set of notes. You'll find it at ProfessorMesser.com/1000notes. Well, there is plenty to still talk about. I've asked you a lot of questions in the last hour, but in the next hour, I'm going to answer your questions. We kind of turn this around so you get to ask what the questions might be. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams at ProfessorMesser.com/1000to-success. I need to update that. This is for the one yesterday from 1001. Well, also, discounted vouchers. You don't need a coupon code. You don't have to hunt around for the best price. You got it right here at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers, and you get my Exam Hacks ebook for free, which is really great. And of course, if you liked what we did today, it'd be great if you could click the like button on this video right now. Show me a little bit of love anyway. It's time to pay the price, as they say. Thank you, Tim Tracker. So this is one way that you don't even have to pay anything, and you can help us by clicking that like button on this video. Also, follow what we're doing on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram by visiting ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter/YouTube/Instagram. It's all there. That will certainly give you information that can help you with your A+ studies. Well, thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the after show. We got a lot more going on, and we appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you next time on the A+ Study Group. So let's now shift our gears. If I can get the right graphics up on my side. There we go. I need to get my call-in lines up and running. I'm not even prepared on this side. I don't even think I have the right things here, but I need to get my phone lines up and running so that you're able to call into the show. And as soon as I do that, I'll explain to you in just a moment how you can call in. I will also take questions from the chat room. I've seen a number of these come through, and I'm more than happy to answer them from the chat room. We'll go through all of those. Let me call in real quick. We'll hear the noises here as it does this.
Thank you for...
Well, you're welcome. That's mighty loud. Let's type in my super secret code. It says...
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
All right, I'll type in my 6-digit PIN. And if I do that right, the nice lady...
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Thanks, nice lady. That means that you can participate either by putting your questions into the chat room, or you can participate by not doing that. I need to change my graphic. There's so much going on. I'm just one person, people. To make all of these things happen, which means if I move my graphic around, then you can see my graph. There it is. The phone number, if you wanted to call in, it's a toll-free number in the continental United States, 855-785-RJ45. That number, again, 855-785-7545 will allow you access. We'll put you on hold anyway, and we will get to you in just a moment. We also, if you are calling from outside of the continental United States, you're able to use Skype to call in for free because no Skype minutes are required. You just put +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545, and you can be put into the queue, which is already full. But you can wait till the queue perhaps frees up. So if it doesn't answer, that's why, because the queue is all full right now. We'll be getting to that in just a moment. This is the after show. Welcome, everybody. My thoughts on the Google certifications. I've looked through the Google certs. I like the content that Google has put into their certifications. I have not seen many employers pick up on it yet. This is sort of the challenge we have when working with certifications, is that we're effectively, for the most part, most of us are going through the certification process to get a job or get a better job, which means that we're hoping the employer recognizes the value of the certification. If the employer isn't asking for the cert, then they probably don't put any value on the cert, especially not for the particular job that they tend to be promoting. So we're still seeing the Google certifications haven't been out very long. So we're sort of getting there, sort of trying to make that happen. And it's getting a little bit more recognition in the industry, but it's just not quite at a tipping point yet, has not quite made that large number that I think we need for people to find that certification valuable. It's just that CompTIA has been around for so long and its exams are constantly updated. They're very comprehensive. So in that particular case, CompTIA tends to do very well in being able to work through it. Can we have a Discord, Professor? Well, it works the same way as everything else, professormesser.com/Discord. I don't advertise the Discord because I'm not quite sold on it being a useful communications tool in my particular case. I want a tool that's on my site so that people are on my site, they can find it very easily and use it without having to load up a separate piece of software. Obviously, with Discord, you can run it from the web, but you'd have to register, and there's other things involved. But again, we talk tipping points, and it does have some functionality that other chat capabilities, other chat features, especially the one on my site, does not have. So I'm kind of running it kind of in a secondary mode, but it is available at professormesser.com/Discord if you want to try it out. There's not a lot of action. It's one of those scenarios where, because I don't talk about it or advertise, there's not a lot of people on it. So you may not find it as valuable, at least today, as you might think, but maybe that will grow. I think a lot of people are using more of Discord. I certainly use Discord all the time. So it's really challenging knowing the best way to implement it so that it's something that's manageable and yet useful and valuable for you to be able to use. So that's the key. And I don't want to have third-party moderators. I don't want to have secondary people moderating. I want it to be controlled a little differently. So there's another reason why I don't do much of Discord. So that gives you a perspective of it. But you're welcome to join. And who knows, in the future, maybe it will become a thing that we can use. In the meantime, we have some phone lines we can go to. Some folks have been nice and holding here. Florida connection. We can go to Central Florida, the 407 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Ken, Professor.
Hey, Ken. What can we do for you?
How you doing? Great study group. First time yesterday and today.
Oh,
fantastic information. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Listen, I'm an old radio guy. I was a cast-off from the layoffs a year and a half ago. Still trying to, land on my feet. Love IT. Been studying for a couple of months now. Any advice for an older guy? I'm not the 20-something that's going to be with the company for, 20 years after they put the money into training. Just curious, with an A+, where you might recommend, jumping into.
Well, it's not been the same since the Phillips file went off the air, but we do have...
I work there. I know Jim.
There you go. Oh, fantastic. See, that's That's always good. Monsters in the Morning, Real Radio in Orlando. Enough of the prompting of that. But you bring up a very good point about people that are making transitions. And you're not the only one in this scenario. I get emails and messages all the time from people that they're coming from a different vertical. They're coming from a different set of career paths into IT. They could have been nurses. I've talked to lawyers. I've talked to truck drivers. I've talked to people that are working retail jobs. They come from everywhere. I think primarily because IT has such, obviously there's IT jobs everywhere, especially Orlando, a huge area for IT-related jobs. And it's a lot of upward mobility, which you sometimes don't see in a job like a truck driver or transportation or manufacturing or healthcare or whatever it happens to be. So it's perfect to transition into. Also, the computers really don't care your age. It's the people you work with that tend to be the biggest problem. And we tend to see sort of entry problems or re-entry problems in this particular case when people are moving into IT. So first you've got the challenge of knowing the content, and we're sort of covering that base here, getting the A+ fundamentals down, understanding networking, understanding security, getting you in the door, getting the job or getting that better job in IT. I think we covered that piece, and everybody's sort of on the same floor, the same working area with that. The parts that are difficult for somebody transitioning, there's usually two major hangups when it comes to that. One is money. You know, if you're working as a nurse, you're working as a truck driver, you've been there a number of years, whatever you've been doing, you ostensibly have worked up to a level where you're making more than minimum wage at that point. At least that's how many of us, as we progress through our career, hope it's going to go. But when you move into a different area, whether it's IT or anything else, usually there is a point where you have to kind of start at the bottom and work your way up unless there are some type of extenuating circumstances. And that is one of the challenges you have to deal with, is moving into a position that could possibly be paying less than what you were making at the original job. There were some conversations going on Reddit this week about that, and somebody made the point, and I think a very good point, that there are some jobs you can get, for example, in retail that might pay $15 an hour. There are other jobs that you might get with IT, maybe help desk jobs, that might pay $14 an hour. And the argument that they were making is, why don't I just make $15? It's paying more for me to have this retail job. I'm just going to do that. But we also have to think about the long game here. IT, perhaps more than any other type of job, allows you upward mobility, the likes I have never seen in another vertical market, unless you are a crypto collector of monies. You know, if you're collecting a Bitcoin, that's a little different, but not all of us is in that position. So if you're trying to work through that process of, am I going to make money with this? You are, but it's going to be a little bit of a ramp. Fortunately, the ramp moves relatively quickly in IT. So that's great that you're able to at least get in the entry-level job. You may have to suffer a little bit. There may be a lot of ramen that you're eating to get through that first year. But at that point, you're usually, after the first year, able to jump into a job with a little bit more money. So for those of you that are looking at IT, there's really no ceiling on this. When I left working for a third-party company, I was a senior systems engineer with tens of years of experience under my belt. I was working for a very high-end security company, and they paid very, very well. And you're able to move up into those jobs relatively quickly. So I tell people, yeah, start at the bottom, do your dues, kind of learn as much as you can, be the sponge, and then you're going to be able to jump out of that into a higher income bracket very, very quickly relative to anything else you could ever possibly do. The other problem you run into for people like me, and I won't say people like you and me, but certainly people like me, for those of you that can see me, is I'm not a young whippersnapper. I'm not right out of college. I'm not even young at this point. So if I wanted to get into a job, I have to worry that maybe people don't want to hire me because I'm a little bit older than someone else might be. And although ageism isn't something that is widespread, it's something that people my age tend to concern themselves with because there are realities associated with that. People tend to like to work with people that are similar to them, that have the same interest in music, that have the same cultural references. And I get that, but it also has a limiting factor for people that are trying to get into this field and they're a little bit older. For that perspective, I have a video I did on how to get into IT with no experience, where I mention a key part, a key element of doing this is to know somebody who already works there. And that is the part that an old person like me would be able to leverage, because through the years, I've collected a relatively large, not a very large group of LinkedIn connections, but a relatively large group. I've worked with a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And so if I ever need to find a job, I'm going to reach out to one of them first and say, how about where you are? Anything good over there? How about where you are? Is there anything good over there? Because when you walk in the door and you say, I'm here for that job opening, let's do an interview, and I know these people who already work in the organization, it's remarkable how powerful that is. So if you have any connections, as second and third level as they might be, take advantage of them. Know that somebody is really, you may not know somebody in IT, but you know somebody in accounting who knows somebody in IT. Use that connection. That's an important connection. And the fact that they know you, they can at least have a relatively interesting amount of trust. There is at least a connection and somebody who can vouch for you at the organization. That's actually pretty valuable during the job process. So take advantage of that. If you haven't built up your LinkedIn, for everybody listening, get your LinkedIn running. Have your LinkedIn focused on your professional connections, not necessarily. Your objective with LinkedIn is not to create the biggest grouping of people following you. That's not what LinkedIn is. Go to Facebook for that. Go to Twitter for that. But if you are someone who's trying to get a job, you need to collect yourself with like-minded people who know you, who you've worked with, and who can vouch for you. That's the value of LinkedIn. That's the best way to take advantage of it. There's no single way to get around some of this. It's a little bit of a challenge, but one of your advantages is that in the Orlando area, lots of companies with a lot of IT in the area. It used to be one of my territories. And so I've worked with government contractors in Orlando. I've worked with state and local government. One of the hugest educational government areas is Orange County. You've got third-party organizations like the Disneys and the Universals of the world have big IT investments in that particular area. And of course, the third-party companies. There's publishing companies, there's manufacturing companies, there's all kinds of companies in Orlando. So you're in a good geography. So you should be able to leverage that as long as you've got all the right combinations of things that you can put into that mix, and maybe that will help you, Ken.
Yeah, I've also got some great connections in the radio industry. I've been working with the software for years, music scheduling and automation.
Great.
And I've programmed radio stations. I've done that. I don't need to do that anymore. I'm really excited about IT and computers. It's my passion. And a lot of the people I'm finding, I've lost out a couple of positions. I've said, hey, I don't mind starting at the bottom. I'll be a support tech. But I'm sensing that my lack of formal skills might be holding me back, and I'm hoping the A+, will be the thing that takes me over the edge.
It's one of those where it's sort of a combination of different things you have to add on to that, whether it's volunteering or certifications, formal education. Sort of have to combine all of those things together. And knowing people is certainly a shortcut. You mentioned radio and audio, and even in some cases, just broadcasting in general is so focused on digital these days. For those of you that are watching the video stream, I effectively have a radio station level audio system here that is really effectively just running Linux. It is all digital. The only analog part is the audio going in and the audio coming out. Everything else inside this box is all effectively digital communication, and allows me to really manage where the audio is going. I have a software-based front end that I could configure every setting. I don't even have to touch the panel if I don't want to. I can go all online and do everything, but that means I need to have an understanding of networking. I need to have an understanding of what the differences between unicast and multicast is. I need to understand how to connect these together so that they will work properly. And that's another good point you bring up, is that if you've been working in a segment, I've talked to, for example, police officers who want to go into IT, and I tell them, go to the IT department of the police department. There's huge amounts of IT in the police department. So leverage what you already know to be able to work with the things that you'd like to work with. Use some of that institutional knowledge that's in your brain, because the people in IT would love to take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, and I think the A Plus may be the answer, and your materials have certainly helped me, and I appreciate all the videos and all the course materials. I bought the practice tests, and
That's great.
Looking forward to passing the exams, and we'll see what the future brings.
You got the right strategy. Just keep doing what you're doing, Ken.
All right. Thanks a lot for all the advice and help.
I appreciate the call. That's always good if you're ever in a situation where maybe you want to jump out of what I'm doing now and get into IT. There's so many different variables and concerns, and it's sometimes very, very stressful to think about that kind of change. But one of the great things about IT that I tell people all the time is it is an equalizer, because the computer doesn't care who you are. The computer doesn't care about your background. It doesn't care where your family's from. All it cares about is, are you putting in the right information? Are you able to get the right information out of this? And most often, working with computers is about working with people. So a lot of what you do with people skills is at least, if not more important sometimes, than what you know in front of the keyboard. It's a combination of things, like anything else. Let's go back to the phone lines to the 617 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Vincent, and I'm calling from the Boston area.
Hey, Vincent, I think you called back in December. Thank you for calling again.
I'm surprised you remember.
I did. It's
Okay.
actually on the screen in front of me. I didn't remember, but I'll pretend that I did.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm calling because 2 weeks ago I completed the second exam. I actually took the exams in reverse order. I passed 1002 in March, and then back in March, and then I passed 1001.
Great.
May 24th. So I got my certification. I had some questions prepared going into this, but I'd say the thing I'm going to ask most about is, I have the CompTIA IT roadmap in front of me. It gives a very general consensus of all the certifications you can get and what category of IT you can get into. But but it's just it doesn't tell what the specific jobs are. That's the only thing missing from the CompTIA career map.
Right.
So it's kind of how do I explore what types of, because I'm still trying to explore what this field is and what the A+ certification prepares me for and where I can go with it. And I'm just trying to figure out what part of IT am I interested in, and what type of certifications I want to obtain, and what's a good starting point. Now I have my A+. So I guess it's two questions roll into one. What's the next best job after getting an A+? And second, how do I further explore all the fields in IT so I can narrow down to what part of IT I'm interested in.
This is I've got on the screen right now the IT certification roadmap from CompTIA for those folks who are watching, and you can see from this it is extensive. There's just 100 different certifications on this particular page. They're broken out by beginner, intermediate, advanced, and expert, and they're broken out by categories such as information security, cloud technologies, IT management, web and mobile, et cetera, et cetera. This is on the CompTIA website. All I did was search for CompTIA certification roadmap, and it took me right to it. This is a great view to be able to see all of the options available, but at the same time, this is just an awful explosion of information to try to take in for someone who has no knowledge or limited knowledge, or in my case, even some knowledge of the industry, and being able to understand what all of these are. I don't know what all these are. I know what a lot of them are. Some of these I'm trying to remember. Did you take the HDI DSM? I don't even know what. HDI SCM. or perhaps the CWTS. I'm going to have to go look at my notes because that's just way too much information. I think instead of worrying too much about the roadmap that's here, at least at the beginning of someone's career, where you're really kind of focusing on the beginner/novice side of this, I would probably recommend instead to start reading through the job postings in your area. It doesn't help very much if I tell you what your path should be or what CompTIA tells you what your path should be, if none of the employers are matching up with our idea of what your path should be. Ultimately, I think most of us are doing this because we're trying to get a job or get a better job. And that means that someone hiring us is looking for a particular set of skills. It would make sense for me to be able to match what the employer would like to see, not necessarily what me or CompTIA. Now, it could be that this roadmap matches what a particular employer is looking for, but there's just so much here, it tends to be more confusing for someone who's sort of just starting out in the industry. Instead, you may just want to go out and look at, I mentioned doing this in my video of how to get a job in IT with no experience, is creating a spreadsheet and list out all of the jobs in your area that match your particular requirements or your particular knowledge level, what you think you might be qualified for. And put them all down in a list. List out what the jobs are, what company they happen to be with. If they are looking for a formal set of degrees or knowledge that you should have, put down the 2 or 4 year degree they happen to be looking for, or the fact that they're looking for one at all, or maybe they're not. Make a note of that as well. They will usually list out the certifications they would like you to have. That would be a nice thing to list out. And then they usually will put, it would be useful if you had these skills. And they will list out, Microsoft Windows Active Directory, Azure Web Management. They would go through a list of the different things they would like you to know. It would be good to list those out. So if you just look at a single job posting, that's an interesting view of that particular employer. But let's do another job posting and from a different company. Let's do others from other companies. Let's get about 10 of those on our spreadsheet. And now let's step back and look at the spreadsheet. What are people asking for that matches my particular level of expertise? Is everybody asking for CompTIA A+? Okay, well, I need to go get an A+ certification. Is everybody asking for an HDI DSM certification, whatever that is? They might be. But the only way we would know is if we were able to do that research, put it into the list, and really be able to evaluate what employers might have. Ultimately, for most of us, our goals, our path through IT is at least mostly, if not partially, dependent on what employers would like us to do. So that's where I tell people, don't worry about what I'm telling you. Don't worry about what CompTIA is telling you. Worry about what employers are telling you, because they're the ones that would like to give you some money, and it'd be best if you were able to match those up in some way. And once you do that, once you go through the list to see what employers are looking for, maybe then come back to this huge list of the IT certification roadmap and start figuring out, oh, well, they're asking for A+. I see where that is. That's up here in the corner. And you'll notice A+ applies if you're going into information security, network and cloud technologies, hardware infrastructure, storage and data. For some reason, it doesn't fit into IT management strategy. I guess that makes sense. It fits into web and mobile. It fits into software development. So all of those really are good places to go. Now, the other question you have was sort of, how do you know what these jobs are and what people are wanting to do in IT? And IT is just many and varied. It's not a single job. It's not a single set of skills. In fact, in IT, there's no way you will know everything there is to know about everything there is in IT, because that's impossible. There are people in IT that deal with networking, others that deal with security, others with databases, others with data in itself these days, others that are working on managing and administering data centers, which has its own path associated with it. All of those are really useful to know. And I think if you go through what people are asking for from a troubleshooting, from a job posting perspective, that's what they're asking for, is you should have these skills and you can match up with that. Those of you that are asking where this comes from, it's CompTIA.org/certs roadmap. CompTIA.org/certs roadmap gives you a piece of that. So Vincent, I don't know that I have specific recommendations for you other than maybe just ignore the roadmap for now and focus instead on what are employers asking for. Once you get into an IT job, you'll start seeing very quickly that there are different areas, different categories of IT, and you'll find yourself being interested in one of those. Maybe you'll find, oh, I really like networking. Let's go do some more networking things. And then you can go back to one of these roadmaps and see, what do networking people need to know? Oh, well, they need to know A+, CCENT, which doesn't exist anymore. This is already outdated. But you've got Linux Plus, you've got the CCNA, you've got OpenStack, you've got a bunch of things listed here that are very focused on networking. But that's what you want to do. Get into IT. It will become very apparent what interests you, and you'll start to lean in that direction. And when you do that, you'll notice the jobs that are available in that direction. And that's where you'll end up getting that next job, is working with databases or networking or security or servers or workstations or whatever it happens to be. Don't worry about what the certification roadmaps are telling you. Find out what employers are telling you. I think that will be more valuable.
Okay, so it's kind of like, I want to like how do I explore those interests? Is it like the same thing you just mentioned, or just like how do I find out which, because I'm still don't have a preference yet in terms of like what I prefer over the other, whether it's like cybersecurity over data management example. Like it's like I'm still trying to find out where in IT I want to go. Like I don't want you to repeat what you just said, but I'm trying to find out like how do I explore these interests.
There might be places to do that, even in on some online forums. Reddit is a great source for that because there's so many subreddits associated with some of these technologies. There's a database subreddit. There is a system administrator subreddit. There's a cybersecurity subreddit. And you can drill down into each one of those and see what people are talking about. What are they doing day to day? Often they'll have their they'll talk about good things that are happening with their job. They'll also talk about things that frustrate them with their job. So you can kind of get a perspective, and other people will weigh in and say, well, here's how you can handle that, or here's what an option might be if you're working along those lines. So you can see what server administrators, system administrators, networking professionals, security professionals are doing. And each one is a little different, and there's a different focus. So that may be another great source for gathering information.
Okay, I say, like, I've asked all my questions. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Vincent. I appreciate the call.
All right, goodbye.
And please call back anytime. That's one of the great things about this. We just open up the phone lines. You are more than welcome to call in anytime. This is useful. That hopefully everybody got that roadmap URL. Again, if you were interested in seeing that, CompTIA.org/certs roadmap is where that came from. There's a number of different roadmaps you'll find that are out there. That just happens to be one of them. Let's go back to the phone lines. I know we've holding for so long. Thank you for holding. It's William. Hi, William.
Hey, Professor. How's it going?
Thank you for calling again. What can we do for you?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, that I finally broke down and got the course notes, and I'm going to be using them in conjunction with the videos like you suggest.
Thank you.
Of course. And the second, I have two questions and one PSA. The question is, okay, I think I've heard mentioned in one of the study groups something about M.2. I have a Dell Latitude that I'm thinking about putting that in a legacy laptop, and I'm assuming that if it does have PCIe that I can do that. I have to look at the spec sheet, of course.
Well,
yeah, I wonder if, okay, go ahead.
M.2 is a socket type. So it is a sort of like PCI Express is a type of socket on your motherboard. M.2 is a socket type that is on your motherboard. Okay. And it has a very specific connector type associated with it. Now, the bus that it is using could be, and very commonly is associated with PCI Express bus that is on the motherboard. That is the lines of communication that are etched into the circuitry of your motherboard. But obviously, If for those of you watching, you can see that's a very tiny connector that is on the end of that M.2, in this case, an NVMe, looks like an SSD. So you've got connectivity there to plug in if the motherboard supports it. And there's nuances to that. Sometimes that M.2 connector shares the same bus as the PCI Express. Sometimes it's on its own bus. Maybe it only shares the bus associated with a particular PCI Express slot. You'll have to look at your motherboard manufacturer's documentation to know what's there. Yeah. The M.2 is the type of connector. The NVMe describes what you're plugging into that connector. For those of you looking at this. So this is an M.2 interface that is on an NVMe SSD drive. So that's where those different terms come from. And there's different types of connectors for M.2. You have to make sure you're using the right type.
Right. Okay. And I was wondering if Tim Cook and Apple are feeling kind of generous and have some sort of Mac OS virtualization for those of us who are not Mac OS type.
You know, one of the challenges with Mac OS and virtualizing it isn't the actual virtualization process, it's the end user license agreement associated with Mac OS. The end user license agreement for Mac OS specifies that you can virtualize it, but the virtualization of it must occur on Apple hardware. Well, that sort of takes away for those of us that are running a different operating system with different hardware. Even though you could do it, you are legally not able to do it. So that doesn't work so well for people that are doing that. There are a number of cloud providers that will give you a remote desktop, effectively, functionality into Mac OS. But for the purposes of your A+ exam, I don't even think that's necessary. I think that all you need to know is some of the basics of the terms that they have in the objectives. There's a handful of utilities you need to know. And all of the command line that is in the exam that is in some way associated with Mac OS is identical to the command line you would find in Linux. Now, I realize those are two different operating systems, and for those of you, you don't have to send me mail about BSD and Next and where Mac OS came from, but the commands you would type in at the terminal prompt, either in Linux or Mac OS, are effectively identical. So if you can do it in Linux, you effectively now know how to do it in Mac OS as well.
Right. And also, lastly, I had a little bit of a PSA for a lot of folks who are concerned about not having experience. I have seen on YouTube a channel called Kobuman, Cobuman, and he does a lot of sims, and one sim in particular is a 90-minute sim, help desk tier 1 sim, which I thought was pretty good. I just thought I'd kick that out there as a suggestion.
Okay. We always love PSAs. Thank you for that recommendation.
Of course. Hey, thank you for all you do, Professor, and have a great day, sir.
Appreciate the call, William. You too.
All right, bye.
This is always a challenge if you're trying to upgrade a machine. I always tell people, get that SSD. There it is. Get that SSD drive installed, whether it's a 2.5-inch SSD or whether you've got an NVMe connector. So convenient, so fast. If you're running spinning hard drives right now, well worth the money. One of the best upgrades you'll ever do. No, the best upgrade you will ever do on your system is to put an SSD on that. Let's go back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long from the 915 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. Thank you so much for picking up my call. I really want to appreciate you for all the help you have given me throughout the years. I have actually passed my A+ exam, Network Plus exam through your course notes and everything.
Nice.
I've been asking you, willing to ask you, is there any way I can upgrade my course notes and Q&A?
Are you looking
Q&A questions?
Are you looking to go from like one version to another? Like you've got the security plus 501, you want to go to 601, things like that?
Yes. So what happened is basically I was studying for my 501 6 months ago, COVID hit, I lost my job, and I was looking for a new job. So I got a new job. I got really distracted for 6 months. I haven't touched Security Plus, but at that time, I was getting around 90%. I'm so silly that I didn't get the exam. Now I went back. Actually, I recently lost that job again, and I'm back in IT.
Okay.
I was practicing some exams, and I was getting around 80% on average.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure if I should go for 501 or I should just skip it and go for 601. So I'm willing to buy the course notes and the Q&A questions so I can really get really good at it. Well, but I'm not sure if I'm going to give the 501.
Well,
I was wondering if I do buy those, can I upgrade them?
Well, I'll answer I'll answer your question and I'll give you some recommendations. So first off, for those of you that are watching that are working towards your Security Plus, right now you can take 2 different Security Plus exams. One exam, but you can choose which exam you want to take to be able to be certified. There's the SY0501, which has been out for about 3 years. And in the November timeframe, the SY0601 was introduced. So we're currently in this overlap period where both exams exist, and you can take either exam. The reason they do that if you've been studying for the 501, they don't just cut you off when the new one shows up. You've got some time to finish up your studies, get certified, and when you get certified, regardless of which exam you take, you're certified for 3 years. So this is the great part about this, is that you've got the opportunity right now to take the 501 and get certified as long as you're able to do that before July 31st, which is the retirement date for the SY0501. If any of you have been studying for 501, and it sounds like you are doing extremely well with the 501 content, all of your study materials right now are 501 study materials. I will say the 501 exam has 30% fewer exam objectives. It's a much easier exam to study for. That's a really good place to be. It sounds like your numbers are really good with your practice exams too. So if I were you, if I were in your shoes and you're back now to doing this, you already have an investment of time, you already have study materials you've purchased, and you're doing pretty well with really understanding the content itself, go take the 501 before it retires on July 31st. You've got over a month before that goes away. Take it, get certified. You're Security Plus certified for 3 years. You earn exactly the same Security Plus certification as somebody who walks in and takes their 601 exam. There's no difference between those 2 certifications, and the employers don't care as long as you are Security Plus certified. So that's my first recommendation to you is, given your background, what you know, and how well you've been going so far, that's really viable. Now, let's say that timing-wise, it doesn't work out. There's other craziness going on in your world right now. You just know you're not going to be able to make it into that room by July 31st, but you've made this investment in 501 materials, and I don't want you to lose that whole investment. So if you're somebody who has purchased an earlier version of my materials, you can always upgrade those materials to the new version. Most of the time, that's around a 50% discount. So you can upgrade the 501 course notes to the 601 course notes. You can go from the 501 practice exams to the 601 practice exams, and you're not paying full price for them because you're already owner of the previous version. You simply pay an upgrade. The way you would use that is you log into your member account. There's an upgrade link right next to the things that you've already purchased. If you click that, it gives you a listing of all the upgrade options available to you, and the discounts are already built into those upgrade options.
So I had the digital version, and it was giving me the upgrade to physical version, but I wasn't looking for that. So I wasn't sure, I meant the version upgrade.
Yeah, if you have a digital version and it's not showing you an upgrade to the digital version, then that means I've done something wrong. So send me a note, open up a ticket, tell me it's not showing what I think it should be showing, and then I'll fix what I did wrong, because that's more often than not where the problem exists.
Got you. But I do not. Do you have Security Plus 601 notes?
Absolutely.
Did you release them yet?
I released those back in October, before the exam was released. I had those out, and the practice exams are out as well. The entire 601 course is done, so I'm off to other things at this point. 601 is full and complete and ready to go for anybody who wants to earn that certification.
That sounds awesome. One last question. It's completely unrelated to everything. What are your thoughts on cryptocurrency right now?
It's a little crazy right now, isn't it? But when has cryptocurrency not been crazy? I began investing in cryptocurrency too late. It was about 3 years ago. I started just buying up some coins and keeping them. That investment went from, it's probably made 5 or 6 times its initial investment, which is really good. That's fantastic. I love the promise of cryptocurrency. As someone who sells online worldwide, I have to struggle through differences in currency in different countries, different fees that are associated with moving this data, moving this money between different countries. There is problems if you ever travel to a different country where you have to now go through the process of making sure you can buy things. There's such value in the promise of cryptocurrency that we haven't quite yet been able to really execute on. But I like what we're doing with it. It's great benefits. It doesn't fix everything. There's still problems that would have to be figured out. For example, right now, when you buy something with a credit card, you've got options to get your money back if something goes awry. If somebody tries to take your money and it's a fraud, you can go back and get your money back. The problem you have, though, is cryptocurrency doesn't necessarily include some of those things. So there's little things we have to figure out with cryptocurrency. And it's sort of a mess right now because you have an investment aspect to cryptocurrency and a practical aspect to cryptocurrency. But I like what we're doing with it. If you go to my site and try to buy something, you can see that you can pay with a credit card, you can pay with PayPal, or you can pay with Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, and a bunch of others as well. So I love it. I like the idea of it. I never exchange mine. If you were to buy something on my site with cryptocurrency, I just keep it. I hold. I'm a holder. So I like the idea of it. It's a little crazy right now. It's not something that somebody puts money into if you're planning for the future. This is purely speculative. This is more than speculative. It is wildly speculative. And so it's important to me that the cryptocurrency have a purpose, that there be a reason it exists. For instance, the Dogecoin thing that people are mentioning in the chat room right now, there's nothing that it's based on. It is a meme of a cryptocurrency that everybody jumped in for a moment, but I'm looking long term. Does this have viability? Is there a value to this? Are people using it for something today that has value? To me, that adds some value to the purpose of the coin even existing. I did not invest in any measurable way into Dogecoin because there's nothing underneath it to keep it up. It's something that's a flash in the pan. We're never going to use that as a legitimate coin because there's no reason to use it as a legitimate method of payment. So we're still very early. It's the Wild West. Grab your favorite coin, hold on to it, come back in 10 years, see what happens.
So that actually reminds me of one more question. So
sure.
My question is, do they all use the same kind of security, or they use different kind of security in them? Like some Bitcoins are more secure than the others?
Certainly there are different processes and formats in how these coins operate. Some coins are very transparent so that you can see exactly, you can follow a Bitcoin every step along the way as it moves from wallet to wallet. You may not know who owns that wallet, but you can see where every coin goes. There are other cryptocurrencies that are designed to be private, where there is no way to see where that is going, or at least there are limits on how much people can track what's going on. There are great advantages to that from a privacy perspective. There are huge concerns with that because there can be bad things, as we've seen, happening because people are using cryptocurrency. So there's a balancing act that we have between, do we want the flexibility that an open currency provides to us, and how do we handle the disadvantages that come along with that? We're going to have to see. We're all sort of fighting about, is it good? Is it good for the environment? Some valid questions to be made there. Is it a valid form of payment? Is it more of an investment? Are we all going to move to San Salvador? Who was it that just added Bitcoin as their currency of their country. I mean, just crazy stuff happening right now with these things. So it's so early. It's such a Wild Westy kind of thing that we're just not quite certain yet. Was it El Salvador? Thank you. It was El Salvador that really did this. So I think there's great potential. We just haven't seen it yet. We're going to have San Salvador is the capital of El Salvador, as I remember clearly from my my Spanish class. Clearly, I did not. So I love the idea. I'm going to hold on to mine. I'm going to keep collecting what I can to collect it, and then see where it goes from there. It may just all crash to the ground and we'll all decide this was a ridiculous idea and what were we ever thinking? And that's certainly possible. Or it may be that we all realize there's real value here. We should be doing this instead of having a third-party credit card company, PayPal, or anyone else decide who we can spend our money with. That's there's valid arguments on both sides of that.
Hello?
That's it. That's all I got.
Hello?
Did we lose you? We might have lost you there. But I think that at least gives you a perspective of what I think from a Bitcoin perspective. So now we got a great conversation going in the chat room about what is good, what is bad, what is private, what is not private. These are good conversations to have. We just need to figure out how to manage it properly. The government wants to know how to tax it better because that's what they do. We need to figure out how to use it better because it's still not usable. It's sort of we don't have an easy way for grandma to use a cryptocurrency. So that's what I use as a determining factor. If I can put an iPhone into grandma's hands and she gets it, all right, that's a really valid technology. Now, can they do the same thing with cryptocurrency? Not quite yet. Sort of like encryption of emails. It's still there's still difficulties of doing something like that in the enterprise. We need to figure out the details. We will figure it out though. I bet we will. We'll just have to. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time. We got to shake all this stuff off. Let's go back to phone lines to the 423 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling from Georgia, in the U.S.
Thanks for holding for so long. What can we do for you?
So I had a couple questions. I passed my Core 1 exam yesterday.
Great. Congratulations.
Thanks to your practice exams. Yeah. And I've got my Core 2 next Tuesday. So
wow.
It's kind of close together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've read the Mike Myers all-in-one book before I used your practice exams and videos and stuff. So I kind of studied for both anyway. So
fantastic.
Yeah, so now my plan is to, and this is what I did for the Core 1, is to watch your videos on the Core 2, all of them on YouTube.
Great.
And then just try to actively understand it and then take some notes. And then I will do the practice exams. And then whatever I get wrong, I rewrite the correct answer, why it was correct, and then the wrong answer, along with any others I didn't understand. And then I'll take the next exam and I'll keep doing that. And I did that last time, and each exam I got a higher grade. I got 80%, 85%, and then 93%.
Wow. Those are really good.
So yeah. So I'm going to do that for the Core 2. My question is there anything specific? The first question is there anything specific, concept wise or in terms of memorizing on the Core 2 that I might not cover?
No, if anything, the Core 2 is a little more straightforward. I think people sometimes when they're going through their Core 1 content, sometimes get wrapped around the axle with relatively unimportant technical minutia. I mentioned this yesterday in the Core 1 study group that sometimes people spend a lot of time memorizing the number of pins that's on memory for some reason, even though that's listed nowhere in the exam objectives. It's a little better on the 1002, I think, because there's not that legacy of memorization. It's more of a troubleshooting certification in my mind. And it's well laid out in the exam objectives. In fact, the troubleshooting section is where I probably would tell people if you had to study one section before taking that exam, I would point people to the troubleshooting section, because if you can troubleshoot the problem, then you probably already understand the utility that you're using to troubleshoot it with, and you probably understand the technology that you're troubleshooting, which is what the first couple sections of the certification is about. So if you're already down to the troubleshooting section, you're probably doing very, very well with understanding the nuances of how all of these things work together. That's where I would probably say spend your last bit of time going through each one of those bullets, because they do spell out very specifically in the exam objectives, know how to troubleshoot these situations. And they list out every situation you need to know, and they stay very close to that list.
Yeah, and on your course notes, which are amazing, for the core 2, I've noticed you had some of the stuff red and some of it green. It's like problems and then solutions, and then black is just some extra information about it. Should I just so I should spend my time kind of understanding all that?
Yeah, I try to put in, especially when you're troubleshooting, there's those cases where something goes wrong. What should you be looking for that goes wrong? And then how can you fix that thing that has gone wrong? And I did a little bit of color coding associated with that.
Yeah, that really helps. And so I guess another question I have, which is kind of, well, I got two more, and these are quicker. The Network Plus is what I'm going to study for afterwards.
Great.
I'll probably take a week off after I get certified, just to plan out how I'm going to study and plan out my curriculum.
Good.
I used the All-in-One by Mike Myers for the A+, and that gave me like a lot of background information. It was a lot of unnecessary information for the test, I'll say that. But it did cover what I needed to know. I think I would not have passed if I didn't use your resources, though. So, because I was more objective focused for the exam. Should I, for the Network Plus, do you think it would be best to get the background information from a very comprehensive book and then focus on passing the test with your objectives and exams, or should I just use your objectives and exams and videos?
Well, you've kind of got
pass the test.
I think the format is the same. I don't think your method of studying changes very much between what you were doing with the A+ and what you would need to do for Network Plus, or even, for that matter, Security Plus. I think the structure is similar. CompTIA's exam objectives are laid out to be very similar. The content itself is, of course, quite different, but the style and the layout of the exam is something that you should feel very comfortable with, because it does have a similarity to A+. The books are an important part of this, and I think you really attested to that quite well, which was reading a book provides you with a certain type of content in a certain way. Videos and practice exams provide different ways to learn similar content, and I do think they all need to work together. I have on my site a list of Network Plus materials that I recommend, but you can go even outside the scope of that and find the book that makes the most sense for you. If you're looking for a good Network Plus book, there's a number of really good ones out there. I'd recommend going to Amazon and reading through the chapters of the book that they allow you to read through, because you can look inside the book and read a little bit of it. Every book is a little bit different. Some are written better than others. Some are written for you better than others may be written for you. And I think going through those and getting a better understanding of what people are saying is the better book is also useful. Those lists of comments on each book where people will rate it, you can really gather quite a bit of good information from that as well. Different certifications have different requirements, and you may find that you are using either a book from the same author or from someone else, but just have an open mind about where that content is coming from and find the one that works best for you.
Okay. That's good advice. I'll probably ask more specific questions next Wednesday on the Network Plus study group.
Absolutely. Next Tuesday. The Network Plus study group was changed. It used to, did have it as Wednesday. It's now Tuesday for those listening in and watching our Network Plus study group next week's on Tuesday. You can always go to professormesser.com/calendar.
Okay. So, yeah. And then I'll have my certification then too. Have you heard of WGU, Western Governors University?
Yep.
I don't. It's regionally accredited. I like their competency-based programs. I'm thinking about that in the future. It's affordable, and it's something that I can save up for and pay for without going into debt. And on top of the certifications they offer I'm thinking about going into cybersecurity, and they offer 14 really good certifications that are marketable. So that alone is really great. But I'm wondering if the degree would be marketable where I live in Georgia. Whether I decide to work remote or in Georgia, I'm not sure. But it's regionally accredited, just not in the region I live in. I don't know if that makes a difference.
I don't know that it makes a difference either. I think ultimately the goal with companies that sort of or an independent provider, educational provider like WGU, are really focused on getting you certified. These are the same certifications that you would earn if you did it yourself or if you went to another training provider to get those certifications. But they've already got the process together. They've already got the entire from beginning to end all laid out. They know exactly what resources are available. They're prepared to provide you with those certs, and they kind of stick to those certifications as the information you need to know. What I find, though, on with WGU is you have to make sure that employers in your area are accepting or at least looking for those certifications. Gathering a set of 10 certifications associated with your name after not having any practical experience may not be the best use of your time. It may be that employers either don't accept that those 10 certifications are really very useful without any experience behind them, or they may think that, well, you're a little overqualified for an entry-level position that we would like to have you work on. So those are the situations I think people will run into, is finding the right mix of those things for whatever point they are at within their career in IT. But I like the idea of getting as many certifications under your belt, even if you don't tell a prospective employer that you have these 15 certs. You can pick out the ones that are important to that employer and tell them, yes, I'm ready to go. I am certified in those, and I can provide you with that knowledge today. Put me in the game, and I'll make sure that I've got those covered for you.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's all I have in terms of questions. So,
thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you.
It's one of the challenges you have when trying to find a good provider for education. And I think part of the problem is associated with trying to mix in the traditional four-year degree with what we do in IT with certifications, because we're so focused on certifications in IT. And do we need both of those? I think we do. Employers tend to ask for both of those. Do they work with each other? They kind of don't. There's not really a good connection often between a formal education and certification. I try to give an example of these along with practical experience, along with people you know, in the video that I have on how to get a job in IT with no experience. I think I have a link to that in the video description right now, but if I don't, Lori, who's watching this, will make sure that we add that to the list. That's a good place to go if you're trying to figure out how does formal education, certification, some type of practical experience, and knowing people, how does that all work together to get a job in IT? And it's a 30-minute video. It is just full of content. There's no slack within that 30 minutes, and which is why it's impossible for me to tell you all 30 minutes of that here on the study group. And that's a great reference. If you want to grab that one, I think that's a great place to go. Let's go back to the phone lines, the 862 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Dana, and I'm calling from New Jersey.
Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I have my Core 2 coming up in 2 days and just brushing up on some last-minute troubleshooting skills. I'm looking at your notes, and I just need some clarification on the BootRec. I'm also using other study materials, and they go really into detail of like different switches in the BootRec commands. Like there's fix boot, fix MBR, rebuild MBR. And I just need some clarification on the differences, or even if you even need to know that much into detail. I know you mentioned rebuild BCD, like that's one of the commands you had listed in your notes, but just wanted to know how much in depth I need to know about that. And then just a little bit of clarification on NTLDR, because that is something that I'm a little iffy on still, and what exactly a bootloader would be.
Well, in the case of the exam objectives, a lot of the focus on the BootRec command are in the 1001 exam. That's where it is in the documentation of that one. They don't have a lot of that in the 1002. It might be a little bit, but most of the troubleshooting with that is in the 1001. And they're all four of those you mentioned, the fix MBR, the BCD, everything associated with that BootRec command are all listed in those videos. I go through each one of those and demonstrate for each one of those how they work, give you a view from that at the command line, and try to break through here's what all the differences are and when you would use them. I think there's really only four real major commands you would have to know. And from the perspective of the certification exam, it's unlikely you would be asked to step through each one of those. They certainly could, but it's more likely they would ask you, when would you use this command? And that's probably even more important, is when would I run the repair command? Where would I run the fix MBR? Where would I run the other commands to be able to resolve these issues? I think that's probably even the more important part of it. But I've got a video that stepped through all of that step by step with each one of those specific commands. So I think that would be a good place to go. I think
Core 2.
Sorry.
This is for Core 2, you're referencing.
Okay. That was actually in the most of the references for that are in Core 1. There's not a lot of references to, and I'm trying to recall this off the top of my head, but not a lot of references to BootRec in the Core 2. And let's see where it might show up on the BootRec side in Core 2. There is a troubleshooting Windows that does make a mention of BootRec. This is section 3.1, and only in the perspective, because that's the section I mentioned earlier where we have to know how to troubleshoot things. So startup repair, for example, is the section where you're missing Windows bootloader, and Windows will tell you that you're missing the NT loader, and that what do you do? And in fact, there's very little that you might be able to do. Running startup repair is a good way to do it, or if you have a way to copy over that NT loader file is a good way to do it. We've got also running that boot configuration data repair, the BCD store repair is in there as well. So that's another example of where you would use that. But the actual command line of using the fixed boot and the MBR repairs and the BCD repairs, most of those are in the 1001. You should have already covered that 1001, and so they don't cover it again in the 1002 because it really comes up as part of the boot process on the Core 1 exam.
Okay, that's good to know because I already passed the Core 1.
Excellent.
So at least I don't have to worry about that so much.
Right.
But yeah, I've just been mainly focusing on troubleshooting, and with telling the last caller, I think that's been the majority, especially with your practice test too, is just troubleshooting, whether it's with operating systems or security. I have a feeling that they're going to just give me 90% of the exam is going to be troubleshooting.
I don't know if it will be 90%.
By, my first experience.
But sort of some of these questions, though, sort of turn into troubleshooting questions in the process of them asking you how these technologies work. So it seems sometimes like it is 90%. It sure feels that way, like 90%, because so many of the questions are dealing with, here's something that broke. What utility would you use to fix it? Which is not a pure troubleshooting question. It's more of a question about that particular utility, But in fact, it is a troubleshooting question because you have to know about it. And that's why I mentioned to that last caller that if you go through and study that troubleshooting section, it tends to pull in the rest of the exam, except for security. It pulls in the rest of the exam because you have to know those utilities to be able to do the troubleshooting. So once you get to the troubleshooting section and you really know that cold, I think that really sets you up nicely for the rest of the exam.
Okay. Yeah, I just kind of have to go through your videos again. You mentioned you have something explaining the NT-LDR, right?
I do. It's in the section, the 3.1
Okay.
video troubleshooting Windows.
Yeah, I went through all of your videos, but even still, I still have to rewatch them because there's a lot of them. So there's only so much you can retain in one time. So that's definitely what I'll be doing for the next 48 hours.
Oh, I get it. Absolutely. So best of luck with that.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate the call. That's always something to worry about. If you're ever in a process of what do I study? Where's the study come from? Just go back to the exam objectives. There's a huge checklist. I use that as my checklist when I make these videos. So if you're going through that checklist and you know what the number is, you can easily find the video that's associated with that. And I try to put some keywords into the YouTube side so that you could see, oh, this one covers the NT loader. This one covers the BCD editor. This one covers whatever you're working on. So you've got some options. You can find that a little bit easier than just maybe picking a video at random as we go through it. Okay. The call-in queue is full. Let's go back to it, to the 631 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? Are you on mute? Am I on mute? Is somebody? Oh, I am on mute. Let's try this again, caller. Let's try that. See, it's always good to check the buttons. Are you there, caller?
Yeah.
Me too. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hi, my name is Giovanni, and I'm from the New York area.
Thanks for calling.
For me, so I've been using your content since high school. About 3 years ago, I got my A+ certification right out of high school, my senior year.
Wow.
And I got, between that time and now,
great.
I've gotten my bachelor's degree, and right now I'm currently in a cybersecurity boot camp.
Wow.
And at this moment, I'm actually in like my intermittent period where I'm studying for the Security Plus 501. And I kind of just want to, one of my questions is kind of like, how do I like, with the job search, because I know in cybersecurity it's really hard to like match the, I guess like your knowledge with the experience that they want for entry-level jobs, because there basically isn't any entry-level jobs.
Right. So
like, how do you kind of approach that?
Well, first you need to stop being so much of an underachiever. You should probably apply yourself. Maybe you would do a little bit better. It's getting those certifications right out of high school and pushing through and getting the degrees you have is phenomenal. Nice job with that. Keep doing what you are doing. But to your point, it's sort of a point I mentioned every now and then, is that security is obviously what a lot of people are looking for. My last job that I used working for someone else was a cybersecurity position. It was a senior systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks. And one of the things you'll find, and you're spot on, is if you want to get into security, there's not a lot of ways in at the lower levels. There's not a lot of entry-level positions in IT security. The lower level or entry level positions that are available for security today tend to be in the security operations centers, or the SOCs. The security operations centers usually want somebody there babysitting the screens, understanding who they can call. You're sort of the coordinator of what you see. You may not be able to fix the problem. You may be only able to see a problem exists, and then you have to call somebody or contact someone else who can actually fix the problem that you happen to be seeing. And relative to all of the other positions in IT, the entry-level positions for security are very small, very minuscule, in fact, I will even say. It's not even close. It's just not a lot of jobs out there for entry-level into security. We tend to want people in security who already have a foundational knowledge of networking and operating systems. And so a lot of the times the IT jobs are going to the people that are from the networking team or from the operating system teams. And they're moving up into security because it's a natural overlay into the things they already know. That's sort of the problem I see with a lot of the things online where I see people, we will train you to be a cybersecurity engineer. You're going to get a degree in cybersecurity. Here's things you will have that will say cybersecurity on them without you having any practical experience in the IT security field. And in many ways, that's doing you a bit of a disservice, because people get out of school with a cybersecurity degree and want to work in cybersecurity and then suddenly realize, wait, there's no jobs out there for someone out of college with a cybersecurity degree. There's very little available to do that. There's not none, but certainly very few, relatively speaking. Where most people will get into security is they'll get a generic help desk position. They will move up from there into operating systems or networking. They will spend years as operating system administrators, application managers, being able to understand network, switch, and router configurations, firewall administration. They'll work in that field for years to become experts in those particular areas. And at that point, they would be someone who may be considered for a job that's higher up within IT security. That tends to be the general path. Sometimes you can jump that path a little bit by getting in with the SOC, and that's great. That's one of the few places where an entry-level security position actually exists. Why not take advantage of that and become learning as much as you can and just be a sponge? But you're right, it's a challenge. It's a challenge finding the job, and then it's a challenge from there being able to move up and get the knowledge you need to do more with that particular position. But I think from your perspective, if you really want to get into security as your first job, you want to find that entry level, look at some of the SOC jobs in your area, if they have them in your geography, find those entry level positions, go to some of the security user group meetings. Palo Alto Networks might have a user group that you can join in your area, or Checkpoint might have a user group in your area that you can meet other security professionals that are working in your area and doing these things. And you're going to run across those people throughout your career. Why not find out who they are and begin becoming familiar with and learning more about what they do? That might be something you can look at doing as well.
Okay. So like I don't want to discredit like help desk, but like I feel like I've done like and spent too much to kind of start at that level and spend years trying to work into there. So how would you like approach trying to get in like that SOC job or like a cybersecurity analyst job?
I went through a 4-year degree at Florida State. I got a degree in business management, which is a very good business school, a 4-year degree with knowledge in accounting, understanding in some ways a little bit of technology, personnel management, understanding nuances. I had a very well-respected 4-year degree, and my first job out of college was as a field service person. Effectively, I called myself sort of a glorified cable delivery person, which is really what I was doing. In some cases, I'd show up in the morning and they say, oh, we forgot to put a cable in with the laser printer for this customer. Here, go take this across town to them. I was a courier for this. And I thought to myself, have I made a horrible mistake in my career? Because I thought I had this degree that was going to open doors and give me work in a fancy office building. How do I not have a corner office already up high with a beautiful view of Miami? What was I thinking? But the reality is we have to start at the bottom, learning the fundamentals and having someone else understand that we know the fundamentals so that we can then move up into higher levels. And the part that's great is that part moves very quickly. You should be in a help desk position for 9 months to a year. And at that point, you should be looking at moving up or out. You should never be in a help desk position for any longer than that. And interestingly enough, what I found, because I actually moved from field service into help desk. Help desk was my second job for doing that. And what I found, this was a corporate help desk position. I learned a lot in that position. Not only did I learn a lot, but I met a lot of people that I have worked with throughout my entire career. So this is it's an important phase of your career. Are you smarter than a help desk position? Probably. Will you be able to move up out of this help desk position relatively quickly? I bet you will. But you need to at least start somewhere where people can see your value so that you can then leverage that value and move up faster. It's sometimes frustrating when you know that you're smarter than this. You know you can do more than this, which is great. It's a good position to be in if that's the one that you're in, but you just have to prove it to other people. And I will tell you, most of the time in this industry, other people will see it and they will want to leverage your knowledge. It's not something where people are going to be keeping you down. There's way too many jobs and way too much work that needs to be done. And we need smart people working in these positions. You just need to put yourself into a place, get in the door, have yourself in a chair so that when people need somebody to move into networking, operating systems, cybersecurity, that you're there waiting for that job. The key is not what you think you're able to be ready for. It's proving to other people that you're ready for it. And that's just a process that takes time. Fortunately, in IT, it's a process that goes faster relative to what you might find in other particular lines of work. And there's no ceiling. So you just keep doing what you're doing and you're going to fly to the top very quickly.
Okay, I appreciate that. Because I've just been trying to basically stack as much education, knowledge, certification, certificate programs, basically all I can. And I just see it's impossible, but there's just a giant barrier to get in.
There's a barrier until the point where you're in, and then suddenly the barrier is not there anymore. This is one where you are really in control of where you're going with your career, and nothing that you have done is a waste of time. That formal degree, the certifications and knowledge that you're building, the things that you're doing with your home lab, the things that you're working on inside of your operating systems, the things that you're reading on the internet, all of these things are going to be working in your favor when you finally get into that position. That's sort of the hard part of finding a job. It's like dating. You're going to be shot down over and over and, well, in my case, over and over and over and over again. Eventually, someone's going to say, yeah, let's go on a date. And at that point, you're like, well, okay, that wasn't so hard. No, you were just beat up for the last 100 times that you tried to get that job. And then when you finally get the job, all of that sort of melts away. And now you're in the role, you're in the chair. Now it's all about moving up, and you'll find your way up from there, I guarantee you.
Okay. I have another question.
Sure.
It's kind of on the networking side of it. Probably the most important thing in IT.
I agree.
What are some ways I recommend to network? So currently, I have LinkedIn and I go on there basically all of the time. Especially when I go in there. I have an alarm on my phone for 2 network on LinkedIn. So I do that every day. And I'm just trying to connect with people, but I'm having trouble approaching almost in different other ways that I can network. Just kind of get myself out there as much as I can.
I think there's a couple of things you can do on the LinkedIn side. I mentioned this earlier, where I use my LinkedIn very strategically. It's not about collecting as many people as possible. It's about having the highest quality connections as possible. And that's why my LinkedIn is only connecting me with people that I have personally worked with. I don't tend to add people I don't know, because it's not Facebook. It's not about getting views or clicks necessarily. And I'll talk to that in just a moment. But it is definitely about curating the highest quality set of connections, people that know you, people that you know. That is the highest quality that you can get. Another part about LinkedIn, and I was just reading a great write-up on this on Reddit this morning, where somebody was able to leverage LinkedIn as an information provider. They weren't really looking for a job, but they started posting to LinkedIn. They started creating articles. They started describing some of the things they were doing with the technologies they were using. They started creating valuable information for other people to read, and not just creating it just to have it out there, really creating valuable things that other people in the industry would be able to use. And what they found was that it got the attention of recruiters and other employers, and they ended up being prompted by a recruiter saying, you got some skills that you should be using somewhere else. I've got some openings that might fit. And they went from a $55,000 a year job to a $100,000 a year job without actually looking for it, but they did the legwork and they proved to other people they knew what they were doing. LinkedIn was able to enable that for them, which I think was great. Now, that's obviously not everybody's going to be in that situation with that same scenario, but creating content and providing value for other people is what you're going to be doing day to day in a job anyway. Why not show people you've got the skills? You're effectively building a digital portfolio for yourself that when you're in a meeting with a prospective employer, you could say, well, have you looked through my LinkedIn? That's a really good example of some of the things I worked on. I just finished a project doing this. I wrote up a thing that I did where I ran into an issue here. I've got some screenshots and a tutorial I did of this product. You should look at that. There's some great content out there. That's pretty valuable. And there's not a lot of places you can do that online unless maybe you build your own blog. But LinkedIn gives you a way to allow other people in your area, or at least in your line of work, to be able to see what you're creating, and it effectively becomes that online portfolio that could possibly get you a job that you weren't expecting.
Okay, that's definitely good advice. And this is my last question. I don't want to take everybody's.
Sure.
What other platforms do you recommend to like connect with other security professionals and stuff besides LinkedIn?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to start, but there are other places. Most of the ways that we would connect within the industry is through other user groups. So I mentioned a couple that were specific to manufacturers like Palo Alto Networks and Checkpoint, but the Cisco user group is another good one that is more generic, but obviously Cisco, well, I guess they have some security, something they call security, but at least other security people are there that you can talk to. There's certainly places online where people tend to congregate. Reddit has some very good IT security subreddits, especially their cybersecurity subreddit. It's a great place to keep track of what's going on in the industry and what other people are seeing. When there are outages, when there are attacks, sometimes the first notice I get of those is on Reddit. Other times it's having a great curated list on Twitter. Twitter is incredibly useful to me to be able to kind of get a pulse of what people are seeing. It's not necessarily a great news feed, but you can kind of get an idea of when things start to happening on Twitter. You can really track and see that there's a difference in the amount of data I see coming through there. It's a combination. There's not any single place you can go to build those things up, but it is a place where you can at least start collecting more details and then maybe use that on other services. If I see something interesting on Reddit, I might want to mention that on LinkedIn and ask people, are you seeing the same thing? Get a conversation going and see what other people are talking about. I think that's another great use of some of those online platforms.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate the call.
I appreciate all this.
Best of luck.
I'm going to get on videos now.
Good for you. And I appreciate the support and best of luck. It sounds like you're doing all the right things.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You as well. That's always good to see that people are already thinking along those lines, and you've got an appreciation for networking, not with the packets, not with the frames, but networking with the people. I've said over and over that IT is about communicating with people in a way that uses technology. It's not about the technology. The better you are with communicating with people, and this takes practice, the better off you will find, the more opportunities you will find, and the easier things tend to get. The problems we often see in technology are thrown about by media, by television, by movies. I'm a technical guy and I'm such a geek. But in reality, it's just a bunch of people like you and me hanging out and doing cool stuff with computers. So this is where the rest of the world doesn't quite understand IT in many ways because it is so unknown to them. They create a different view of what technology people are like. The reality is we're just doing the same type of job as anybody else. It just happens to be with computers. And the reality is communicating at a human level tends to be more important than anything else in IT. Let's see. Back to the phone lines. Let's go back to another previous caller. It's Rudy. Hi, Rudy. Thanks for calling.
Hey, how's it going? I'd like to apologize in advance if my dog starts barking. But I have two quick PSAs and one quick question about the utility of A+. All
right. First, what kind of dog?
Oh, it's I'm not sure. It's a mixture of like who knows what.
Oh, it's the best
very
kind.
Loud.
That's the best kind. All right, hit me. What you got?
Okay, so there was a caller a few callers back asking about WGU. It's an excellent institution. I myself am halfway through the cybersecurity program, but I would say that it is very specifically geared towards existing professionals and adult learners. So, I've been trying to get a degree since 2008. For various reasons didn't work out. But I was already in the field. I'm a QA person, all that stuff. And I know what it's like to go to scrums, have weird BYOD policies, ask my administrators for more, RAM on the VMs and stuff. So I was already there. And then I started at WGU, and all that real world experience has really helped me out. So if you're in that situation, you're already working, you need a degree, I would recommend it. But going in fresh with nothing, it's going to be a bit of a heavy lift.
All right, good to know.
Challenging.
Got it.
Secondly, as far as actual testing for CompTIA, I've had 3 coworkers opt to take the at-home version of the tests, and all of them have reported some glitches with the PBQs. They're not able to submit them, or they're not able to edit their answers after the fact. And it's a little wishy-washy. I don't know. I haven't experienced that. So me personally, I've taken them at a testing center, and the level of recourse you have at a testing center is going to be almost infinitely better than what you have when you do it at your house. So if you're able to and you're willing to, I would recommend people take it at a testing center.
I'm kind of with I vote on the testing center as well. I think that's a low stress, high support, easy to fix things when they go wrong environment. Although I understand some people don't have a testing center near them right now or live far away from the nearest one. So the questions or the problems that people have seen with especially the performance-based questions seem to be across the board. They are not isolated incidents. They are with almost everybody taking these things runs into some kind of weirdness with the performance-based questions for some reason. I'm hoping they will work out the bugs associated with that. But if someone's planning to take it online, be ready for that. Be ready for issues or problems. And you might want to read through some of the experiences people have seen on the CompTIA subreddit, just so you know what the different options you might have. It turns out the online proctors don't have much they can provide. Their answer, quite honestly, is you're going to have to restart. Turn it all off and back on again. Well, I think we all know that. We're IT people.
No, definitely. And, I understand that's an access issue. I myself live in the middle of the city next door to a university. So I understand that's not everybody. That's why I say, if you can go that route, it's better. Right. And then on to my question about the utility of A+. I'm going to be fully A+ certified tomorrow, hopefully. I'm taking the Core 2 tomorrow.
Okay.
But my question is, through all studying and stuff, I've kind of realized that there's an opportunity here for me to sort of start a small business of my own within computer hardware repair and stuff.
Great.
What would be a realistic starting point for something like that? Or is that advice kind of outside the scope of what you're giving here?
It's a little bit outside the scope, but not really. After all, this is a business for me as well. This is what I do for a living. So there's an entrepreneurship to this context of the things we're doing here, just as there is for almost anything in IT. The thing that's a challenge when you get into working IT for a company and working IT as a business is that you have to know the business side of things. And it's not that is insurmountable or difficult. It's just involved in understanding how can you make a viable income from the technology that you happen to know. And there is, for example, I've worked for companies that are very focused on selling hardware. That is what they did. The margins are very small and they have to sell a lot of hardware. It just happened to be the company that I was working with had some massive contracts. And so everybody who bought from that contract went through a single company and they made it up in volume and they did very well for themselves. Other scenarios are very service oriented where you get paid on how much time you can spend with a customer. If you're interested in some of these ideas and I listened to a great podcast, Mike, what is Mike's pod? I'll bring up the podcast listing that I have for these. But if you go to the Mike Tech Show, he is someone who is in the industry. He's been doing this podcast for years. He has a group of customers that he maintains. He really focuses on small business IT because small businesses don't have an IT department. They need someone to come in, but who's going to do their backups? Who's going to maintain their systems? How do you know which new systems to purchase? Who's going to manage the software? Who's going to keep the accounting software up to date? Who's going to manage things when ransomware hits? What happens when the power goes out or what happens when backups need to be done? That's his business. And he talks not only about the technical side of things, but he talks a lot about the business side of things and how important it is to maintain certain aspects of the business. And he's constantly finding new, better, and more efficient ways to do the things that he's done in the past. And he's done this a very long time. He's a great podcast to listen to because he's a great technical person, but he's also very good at the business side of things. And I like his philosophy on business. That would be a good one to listen to. And he, of course, has other links on his site regarding running a business as a computer technical support or service provider. That may be a good one to look at.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. That's right in line what I was looking for. And that's about it for me today.
I appreciate the call, Rudy. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Sounds like that going to get that A+ very soon. I can't wait to hear that story when it comes through. Let's go back to the phones. See if I can get to, here we go. Get to the 773. Oh, it's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Yeah, how you doing, Professor?
Good to hear from you. How are you, sir?
Again. Fine, thank you very much. Let me please turn off this so that I could talk to you. Professor, my question is, I'm sure you heard of a technology called Ethereum.
Oh, yes.
And I'd like to know, is it really practical or, plus I heard you have to have a really, very, very capable computer with a lot of very advanced components to be able to use it, and it takes a really long time to be profitable. And another question, which I'm not going to take too many questions because I don't want to make it difficult. Takes too much of the time. The robots, basically, can they, for example, use a robot to be able to do this kind of work, or or something in that nature, automation, so to speak? And I'm going to hang up. Thank you very much, Professor. Nice to talk to you again.
Thanks, Joe.
Great day.
Good to hear from you. That's one of the things that I think, we'll start with the first question, dealing with Ethereum. We talked a little bit about cyber currency earlier, cryptocurrency, and being able to, how we are able to use it. If you were to go out And for those of you that have never looked at the cryptocurrency market, it's ridiculous. It is a sea of options. It is overwhelming in its scope. It is almost impossible to know everything about everything in that market. But there are some big players in cryptocurrency. Obviously, everybody knows the term Bitcoin. In reality, Bitcoin Cash is probably a better and more flexible Bitcoin, but we don't tend to think of that when we think about Bitcoin. Ethereum is one of those top 10 cryptocurrencies that's out there. In fact, if you were to purchase something on my website, I believe, I want to say Ethereum is one of those that is supported. I use a third party to process the cryptocurrency purchases on my site. So they have a list of all of the cryptocurrencies you can use for that. And Ethereum is one of those that they have on that list. We just don't know what we're going to end up with. Everybody thinks about what they could do with these technologies and what they will enable. But what we haven't seen yet is actually the enabling part. We have to some degree. I mean, people have purchased from my site who live in a different country, and they've not had to pay any conversion fees. They've not had to take their current fiat and transition it into a different fiat just so they can purchase something on my site, because I'm in the United States and they're in the United Kingdom or the EU or wherever they happen to be. There's lots that you can do with these technologies. It's a valuable there's a valuable future there if we can figure out how to take advantage of that. So right now, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, the other types of tokens that you can find out there, there's some viability there, but we just don't know what it's going to be like. For example, if you use there's some browsers out there that use BAT, the basic attention token, kind of a weird name, but you can go to a website and tip people in the Brave browser with these tokens. There's effectively a browser that is cryptocurrency aware. And if you visit a site, you can tip people, you can tip that site by using the Brave browser, and it's just built into the browser. That's a brilliant idea. And in fact, I definitely signed up Professor Messer. So if you use the Brave browser and you go to the Professor Messer website, I am a verified site. You can, and people have graciously, thank you, tipped when they've come to the site. And, they put enough in so it's $1. They $1 when they come to the site. That's great. It is also a browser that's kind of built on privacy. There's some great benefits to that. So we're trying to take applications and build them into what we're doing with these cryptocurrencies. We'll just have to find a grouping of these that we can really get behind to really support what these tokens happen to be doing. And maybe it's Ethereum, maybe it's Bitcoin Cash, maybe it's something we don't know what it is yet. We'll have to find out. But there's challenges, there's technical issues, there's economies of scale, there is privacy issues, there's power and our environmental issues associated with cryptocurrency. So all of these are involved and concerns we have to think about, and much broader and much more specific than we would have time to go through right now. But we'll have to see. Have a look at those. Try the Brave browser. Maybe that's the way you get into it and start using some of these technologies and take advantage of them and start promoting them and start using them. That's how it becomes valuable. The other question was about automation, and we've used automation in IT forever. This seems to be a sort of a hot word right now, that automation is a big deal. Everybody's trying to do more with automation. Automation is the big turning point for automation and information technology. The reality is we've been doing automation forever. I think the thing driving automation and the ability to have some good scripting is really the cloud, because that's where we can hands off while we're not looking at it, while we're sleeping at night, have things automatically happen in the cloud that provide value to our customers. And the way we do that is to orchestrate it using some of these scripting technologies, using Python, using PowerShell, using API access, using whatever we happen to have available. And we're still defining and creating new ways to have that happen. There's challenges with all of these, but automation's an incredibly valuable skill. If anyone out there, I mentioned this yesterday, if anybody watching this wants to know what they do along with these certifications, they're getting an A+, they're getting a Network+, they're getting a Security+, but how do you show value to a prospective employer is you need to layer on those skills. And I tell people all the time, layer on Python, layer on PowerShell. Pick one of those or do both, but pick one of those. If you're big into Windows, do PowerShell. If you really like everything else or anything else, do Python. And go learn about it. Go figure it out. Go run some scripts. Go automate things that you're doing in your environment. Go make this orchestration happen with those skills so that you can walk into a prospective employer and say, not only do I have this formal education, not only do I have these certifications, but I do have some practical experience and I've done a lot with orchestration using Python. That's what employers are listening for. That's what they're looking for. That's what they want to check off on their list. They want somebody who can make things easier for them. And it's that automation that's going to bring that to the table. There are, of course, other ways to automate. Through the years, I've done batch files. I've done Perl scripting. I've done scripts inside of applications. Once you learn one way to do it, you can take those skills and really start applying them into other scripting languages. It becomes easier to script in other languages once you learn the first one. So you may find that it's a little bit of a learning curve to finally get that first one in your pocket. But once you do that, it's off to the races. When I was working with Palo Alto Networks, one of the first things I did, they had a kind of something they did internally as a promotion for the systems engineers, that if you came up with the most interesting project, you could win an iPad. At the time, the iPad had just been introduced. Everybody wanted the iPad. So I created a set of scripts that would automatically, using our API, download the configurations from the firewalls and store them as backups. And then I did a video that described the process of doing that. And I used some of the Perl libraries to make that happen at the time. At the time, Python was not as popular as it is now. And was able to bring all that down. They loved it. Like, okay, you win that iPad. Just because I had what I felt were some very basic scripting skills. In fact, the script was nothing that I would write home about. It was probably a little clunky, quite honestly, because I'm not a developer. I don't do scripting full time. I'm not great into automation. But it's something that when people see it working, like, whoa, that all just happened automatically. I didn't have to SSH into the device. I didn't have to pull all of those things down in some way. I took advantage of an API that already existed on these devices. I simply wrote to the API using an existing scripting language and a library that already existed. It effectively was teed up. And I said, tell the API to give me the config. Goes out, grabs the config, brings it down. That was the script. That's what you want to do. Is learn how to do those things, just those minor little things, and then you'll start building onto it and building on, and pretty soon you'll be well read in the world of that particular type of automation. So I think that's the way to go about looking at automation, is keep learning those skills. You will learn those skills and use those skills throughout your career, whatever you happen to do, because you use them everywhere. I do extensive scripting on the Professor Messer website. There's extensive automation I do on my desktop. If you've ever received a CEU from me for one of these live events, the CEU grabbed the email you sent to me, parsed out your name and your email address and everything else, built the email automatically. All I did was look at it, make sure everything was good, and I hit send. So I didn't have to type any of that in. I didn't have to copy and paste it. It was all automated, which is the way it should be, because this was taking me like a minute. For every CEU I got, it was taking me a minute to look up what month that was, verify the super secret code word, copy in their name, copy and paste the email address, make sure I had the month and the date right, put the other text in with the email, verify it, hit send. All right, 50 more to go. Well, that's another hour's worth of work. Or I can click a couple of keystrokes on my system. It does all of that for me, and in literally 3 seconds, it's complete. So now I can get through all 50 of those in a couple of minutes versus an hour. That's a tremendous difference. And there's many places you can go to on the internet where people have talked about their automation, their scripting, the things they've done. Go look at the Python subreddits. Go find the Python training that's on the internet. It's an incredibly valuable skill. It's a skill you'll have in your pocket, and you'll be able to use it for the rest of your career. One of the best things you can do. Well, that finally, after 3 hours today, brings us to the end of another study group. This is just phenomenal. We could not do one of these 3-hour sessions without your support, without your help, without the chat room, without your calls. We sure appreciate you being here. We have a lot of fun in that first hour with the Q&A, and we're going to do more of it next week. If you're working on your Network Plus, or you just like to come and hang out in the after show, we'd love for you to join us on Tuesday of next week. We're doing all Network Plus, and then the week after that is Wednesday for Security Plus. There's always something going on. If you'd like to know when the next event is going to be, make sure you visit the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you for being here for this. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.